Brian, are we good to go?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. He's not quite here yet, but I'm sure he'll get here. Brian, are we good to go?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. He's not quite here yet, but I'm sure he'll get here. Brian, are we good to go?
Yep.
Uh-oh. Okay. Right. I'm getting
a repeat of myself over and over again.
He's not quite here yet, but I'm sure he'll get here. Brian, are we good to go?
Yep.
Uh-oh.
Okay, we should be okay now.
I'm not seeing a record button on my screen. Are we sure we're recording?
Recording in progress.
Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting to order, the City of Monona Plan Commission, Monday, January 24th, 2022. Would you please call the roll?
Yes, Alder Goforth.
Here.
Chris Homburg.
Here.
Robert Stein.
Here.
Green Fallett.
Here.
Nancy Moore.
Here.
Susan Fox.
Here.
Patrick Tupula.
Muted.
He said here.
Okay, I think that's all that I've got that I can see on my screen.
Great. Thanks very much, Brian. Appreciate it. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from January 10th, 2022?
Move approval of the minutes, January 10th, 2022.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Christie's got seconds. Okay. Any corrections, changes, additions to the minutes? Chris?
It may be a bit ticky-tack, but if you remember, we had technical difficulties and we couldn't get that meeting going right away. So somebody tried to tune in at 7:05. We weren't going at all. So we didn't convene until 7:08.
Okay. Great. We'll make that change. Any other changes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes carried. Appearances. Brian, I would assume that we have some appearances this evening.
I've received none via email, but I do have a number of individuals in the audience. So if anyone from the audience wants to make an appearance, I just ask that you go up to the podium, say your name, and limit your remarks the best you can to about 3 minutes. Yes.
Is there anybody that would like one of these printouts that I made here? There you go.
Sure. Thanks.
Can't hear if they're speaking.
Yeah, they're going to go up
No,
to the
they're
microphone.
They're working. They're working their way up to the mic right now, Rob.
Here I come.
Just wasn't sure.
Thanks.
Can everybody on Zoom hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Hi. Hello. I'm Jeffrey Halloran.
Yeah.
I'm here with the Monona Antique Mall and Flying Low Skate Shop LLC Small Business Displacement Compensation Request Proposal. I am speaking on behalf of Monona Antique Mall. Linda present here. And what we have here with copies dispersed into the meeting room. I apologize for not having a JPEG ready for the rest of the crew, but I'll make it clear and concise. And if anybody has a hard time hearing me through the mic or my mask, just say. Okay. This official request is on behalf of both Monona Antique Mall and Flying Low Skate Shop, two of the locally owned and operated small businesses risking being displaced in the plans for the new Compass Properties apartment complex construction on Monona Drive. In a mid-pandemic era that has already been tough on small businesses, the plans for remodeling our stretch of Monona Drive for the apartment complex project need to factor in all parties who have something at stake in this decision to move forward, including small businesses and the residential apartment renters risking displacement. This request proposal focuses specifically asking for the following totals of compensation to be added into the budget for this project being approved. We are asking for a total of $120,000 small business displacement compensation to be paid to the Monona Antique Mall based on how long the business has been in operation and what it would potentially cost to move into a new space, including moving expenses and loss of sales during a move. Flying Low Skate Shop LLC, my small business, it is a skateboard store. Flying Low Skate Shop LLC is also asking for a total of $30,000 in small business displacement compensation. This total is based on what we will need to find a stable new home ASAP for our new small business in light of these looming development plans, and continue growing in the way we have budgeted for based on our current expenses operating out of the Monona Antique Mall. In closing, we ask that the separate totals of $120,000 for Monona Antique Mall and $30,000 for Flying Low Skate Shop LLC be paid to us by Compass Properties to compensate our loss as a small business owners being displaced by this plan. This timeline is based on the undeniable fact that there is no time to waste with regards to being a successful small business in an ever-changing landscape. And so that we as small business owners at Monona Antique Mall and Flying Low Skate Shop can plan for the future now and or be able to hit the ground running and continue to grow our locally owned small businesses here in Monona. We ask that you accept our proposal and approve these funds be paid separately to Monona Antique Mall and Flying Low Skate Shop in an effort to compensate our loss. Thank you for your consideration in this matter. On behalf of Linda Norseman at Monona Antique Mall and myself, Jeffrey Halloran, Flying Low Skate Shop, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to address. I'd like to especially note that we did make mention to the residential apartment dwellers as well. This specific proposal focuses on the $120,000 for the Monona Antique Mall, along with the $30,000 for the Flying Low Skate Shop. This is, just to go freestyle really quick, this is about who we are as a community in Monona. If we're going to be on board with this big, huge change, then let's make sure that everybody who has something at stake in this decision being made is not left out in the cold, and that everybody is being addressed. So, if that all sounds good, that's the kind of place that I like to think of as Monona. It's tough out there right now as it is for these small businesses. So if we're going to go ahead and we're going to say, yes, let's bring in this big new complex, then okay. We can see the writing on the wall. If that's what we're here to approve, then it's important for us to address these figures. And along with that, address what you're going to do about the residents, too, who have been there for a good long while. The original plan A was for me to say, stop right here and, let us have like a skate park here and a multi-use thing. These are the definitive objective points that we're here focusing on instead today with these two figures. And we appreciate your time. And we look forward to meeting with a decision that addresses these requests in a timely manner. And thank you so much for your time, everybody. Was there any questions in the Zoom meeting realm or in the interior here before I
Thank you. Thank you, but this is our listening portion of the meeting. So we're here to just listen to everything that you have to say.
Respect.
And we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Brian, is there anyone else?
Yes, one more gentleman's coming up to the microphone.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Christopher Dahl. I am a resident at 4601. I would also be making a formal request on behalf of myself for relocation fees. Obviously, it's not going to be easy for me to just pick up and move somewhere that I've lived 38 years. I was born in that apartment, and it's going to be an adjustment, to say the least, to be moved from where I am. So I will also be making a formal request in the neighborhood of $5,000 for moving compensation and relocation compensation. I appreciate you.
Okay, anybody
Thank
else in the audience here wish to appear? Okay, I'm seeing no others, Madam Chair, so I think we can
Okay.
close the appearance section.
Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Brian, we will close the appearance section and move to unfinished business, number 5A.
Alder Moore,
I
Yes,
see a hand up.
Pixel 6 has a hand raised.
no, thank you. Thank you. Before we close the appearance section, then go ahead. The same thing applies on Zoom. If you could state who you are, where you live, and then you get 3 minutes.
Absolutely, thank you. Apologize for the no name here. Eric McKay, M-A-C-K-A-Y. I live at 4603 Gordon Ave, so right across the street from where this is being proposed. I've been at each of the, I think all but one maybe, of the sort of pre-conference hearings, have seen the plans developed for this mixed-use project, and it can't be stated any other way, I think, than this project is not right for this space. And that's a very subjective sort of statement, but I think the objective metrics, you can look at comparisons that the proposers have put out there in terms of density, compare that with other projects. You're not going to find the same sort of half block on Springs Haven, basically a half block of distance between Gordon and Monona Drive on Dean. And one of the big concerns that has not been alleviated, although there's no longer an entrance exit off of Gordon Ave, I can't help but think that anybody trying to turn left to go north from Dean onto Monona Drive is not going to find it easier go down Gordon Ave to the far side to hit the lights past the high school and take a left there. Every morning I drop my daughter off at Winnequa School and drive back north on Dean, or east on Dean, excuse me, for Monona Drive. And there are times when I can't turn left already onto Monona Drive, onto Gordon Ave, because the line at the lights with traffic as it is, even with the bank out of operation right now, has so much traffic there. I have 3 small children. They're out on the streets all the time because there are no sidewalks to play on. And I've seen really goodwill efforts to try to address the specific criticisms that have come forward about the project, including the massing, including things criticisms I agree with. The one that is irreconcilable in my mind is 82 units across the street from me in a street that gets parked up just by high schoolers already during most of the year. They've addressed some of the parking from a legal perspective. The reality is it's going to be easier for people to be on the streets. And the reality is there's not going to be sufficient traffic flow in this area. It's the wrong place. And it's not the right fit. And I can't say it any plainer than I think this proposal is a bad idea for the residents of the area already. And I think it's going to make it trickier for people who operate businesses, even notwithstanding the businesses that will be displaced, but the businesses adjacent, they're going to find traffic flow getting in and out of their businesses more difficult as well. So there are metrics that you could check boxes for and say, this is benchmarked individually within the realm of what seems reasonable on each individual piece. But I think what's important to think about is the holistic context and what the residential neighborhood looks like in this area, what the streets look like, and think about how this is positioned now to make life more difficult for folks that are already living here. And I can say that as a resident, as sort of a self-centered point of view, but I think that it's just my reality. And so I appreciate you all listening, and I would urge you to consider sort of the totality of circumstances here and the sort of the fit of this project with this space, in addition to everything else you consider. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm also seeing the hand up of Jillian Slate. Jillian?
Hi. I wanted to echo, I'm Jillian Slade. I live at 4508 Gordon Avenue. I just wanted to echo Eric on the fact that the fit is really inappropriate, and the fact that people already people going down Dean will avoid going down Monona Drive by speeding down Gordon Avenue. And I myself have almost been hit by high schoolers who are blowing through stoplights. So it's already kind of dangerous as it is. I'm a grown adult who's very cautious when I'm walking down the street. But I worry about the kids on the street, and there are lots of kids. And one of the things I really loved about this neighborhood that we loved when we saw our house and moved here a few years ago was the fact that in the summertime, kids are always kind of like migrating from house to house on this street. And it's already kind of a shame that that can't happen during the school year, but the idea that our 2 blocks will no longer be safe or really appealing for people who are families with kids at any time of year, because there will be even more traffic, is really concerning to me. And I feel like this block, because we're on the edge of Monona and we're right near Monona Drive, is just sort of being thrown to the wayside. So that's the concern I'd like to echo from Eric. And I think Jeannie also had her hand up, not digitally, but I think she'd like to talk.
Yeah, thank you. Jeannie?
Yes, I'm Jeannie Edmonds, and I live at 4509 Gordon Avenue. I'm probably one of the older people that have lived on this block. My parents built 2 houses on this street, one of which I'm in now, and the one next door, back in 1951. So my family's been here for years. And I cannot fathom having an apartment complex put in the area that you're proposing, because I echo Eric and Jillian I'm worried about the traffic. We have small children, especially down at the end by where the bank is now, that they do play in the street in summertime mostly, or springtime too, actually, for that matter. So I'm worried about the children, as well as the traffic right now with the high schoolers being parked on the street. And when school is out, you should see the speed at which some of these high schoolers barrel down our street. It's scary at times, and they're loud. In fact, this morning, I have a service that plows my driveway. He didn't even know where to put the snow, because I had 2 cars parked in front of my house, which is where he's been putting the snow. So we had to put it in the neighbor's yard, which is not the best, but it's just we've got so many high schoolers and who already park on that street, and if you add additional people coming out of the apartment building besides that, it's just not safe. So I guess that's as much as I'm going to say.
Thank you. Okay. Now with that, I will close the appearance section and move to item 5A, which is the public hearing for rezoning request and map amendment for retail business district, Monona Municipal Code of Ordinances, section 480-28, Community Design District, Monona Municipal Code of Ordinances, section 480-30, at 112-208 Owen Road, as requested by Slind Realty Company, case number 2-003-2022. The public hearing portion. Is there anything, is anyone here, Jeff? Is there anyone from SLIN that would like to say anything on this public hearing?
Yeah, sure. Bert's here as well. I mean, I don't really have a whole lot to add from the the previous meeting.
Okay.
We're just following up with the request for zoning change.
Okay. Great. Appreciate it. Is there anyone else at City Hall or on Zoom that wanted to speak about this specific zoning only change?
I'm seeing no one in the audience raise their hand to speak at this time.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. That being the case, we'll close the public hearing and we'll move to item 5B, which is consideration of action for approval and recommendation to the City Council for approval of rezoning request and map amendment from Retail Business District, Monona Municipal Code of Ordinances, Section 48028, the Community Design District, Monona Municipal Code of Ordinances, Section 480-30, at 112-208 Owen Road, as requested by SLIN Realty Company, case number 2-003-2022. Brian, welcome to the meeting, by the way.
Thank you.
Guest appearance from the City Administrator tonight.
Yes, happy to be here. Just real quick, I'll give you a brief rundown summary of the project just for the benefit of the audience and just as a summary for you all to start your discussion this evening. Again, as the Madam Chair mentioned, the request that's before you tonight is for a rezoning request and a corresponding map amendment to the zoning map. It's a request to allow for mixed-use development on the property, changing the current zoning from retail business to community design district, which would allow, if that change was approved, it would allow the project to be built in a phased development manner. What's not part of the request tonight and would be taken up at a subsequent Plan Commission meeting at some point in the future if the rezoning request is approved would be the actual development of the project itself. What the SLIN Realty team is proposing is 197 retail residential development units in 2 4-story buildings built out in 2 different phases. There is the proposal for a little over 3,000 square feet of commercial ground floor retail space with additional at-grade and underground parking. One of the items that the applicant stressed in their submittals and conveyed to staff was that they are working with the U.S. Postal Service for the possibility of relocating them within the project, as that existing Postal Service site would be removed as part of this development if it were to move forward. Planning Commission has reviewed this application in 2 different pre-hearing conferences. The first was on December 13th, and the last was on January 10th, at which you spoke specifically on the rezoning request that's before you tonight. The general consensus of those 2 pre-hearings was that the feedback from the Planning Commission was generally positive. Guidance for this property in the comprehensive plan is guided for commercial. Adjacent properties are all, for the most part, guided for multiple family use. Recommendation from staff was to recommend, or have the Plan Commission recommend to the City Council the approval of the rezoning and map amendment from retail business to commercial design district, with any additional comments, findings of fact, or conditions of approval that the Plan Commission may wish to attach to the recommendation. All of the received public comment that we've received in writing has been previously forwarded on to the Plan Commission and will be incorporated into the record for this application. If this application were to move forward and receive City Council approval, the determination of the timing of when a future Plan Commission review of the general plan of development and the precise implementation plan will be dependent on kind of the schedule set forth after City Council has an opportunity to review the request. At that, I'll pause and take any questions that you might have of staff or of the applicant.
Thank you, Brian. Moving from left to right, Christy, like to go first?
Thank you. I was wondering if the SLIN Realty Company was considering having a neighborhood listening session just to field some questions and concerns from the neighborhood.
Bert, do you want to weigh in on that?
We haven't considered. We have talked with a couple of neighbors, and I spoke with someone that called me from the Heritage
Bert, can you speak up? We're having difficulty hearing you.
Okay. We have spoken to just a couple neighbors, and the feedback we got was positive. We haven't talked to the entire neighborhood. So no, we hadn't really considered talking to anybody else. I mean, we have received calls, and we've discussed things with those who have called us. And so I guess that's my reaction.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, in some sense too, I mean, the building is obviously in a little bit of disarray. It's 60 years old. They're closed, and something's going to happen on the site. So, you know, multifamily is definitely the direction that we want to go, and that we see the future for Monona, because the housing situation in Monona, you know, I don't need to talk about that all night, but it's lacking. And there's not a whole lot of options here at this site, given the site layout and the proximity to the postal office building, which we also purchased, in looking at redeveloping the site collectively.
Yeah, I think I can offer my experience as it's somewhat relatable, as the Bloom is considering developing almost across the street from my home. They held a listening session with the neighborhood here maybe almost a month ago, and there were definitely a lot of concerns when we first heard about this, but I would say it was a really nice opportunity for the neighbors to express their concerns and have that, you know, and kind of get some buy-in, if you will, and, you know, just really kind of set people's minds at ease. And MESBA put that together. So I would encourage you to consider it. It was only a couple hours of time. I think it might be, you know, it's not on the city time. You do it on your own, but I think it might be really beneficial for you. I have heard from some neighbors that live near you that are pretty opposed. So I just thought it might be a nice opportunity to get some, you know, to get some feedback and have an open dialogue there. The other thing, and I know this is just for your zoning permit, but a lot of these questions are kind of interrelated. With the post office, do you have any contract with the post office that would guarantee them coming back after they left?
Not currently, no.
They're under, excuse me, they're under a current lease with us. The post office will not guarantee anything. Their current lease provides for a 90-day termination.
Okay.
They will never guarantee a thing.
Okay,
Government.
I just wanted to ask. Yeah, I figured that was.
No, believe me, we'd have done cartwheels. We don't want to see the post office leave. Plain and simple. And I did offer. I totally forgot about this. I did offer to present.
Bert, could you speak up again? Sorry,
Sure.
You're still having a hard time hearing you.
All right, is this better?
Yeah, it is. Thank you, sir.
You betcha. I did offer to one of the persons that called me that I would be happy to discuss any questions or concerns, and I never got a call back. I did talk with them for probably 20 minutes on the phone and explained what we were doing, and the biggest concern that was mentioned, there were two concerns. One was traffic, but the most important was the post office. And so, you know, believe me, if Jeff and I could guarantee that post office would remain, we want it. I mean, plain and simple. We've talked to the powers to be, and we are waiting to meet with them again. So we've done everything we can at this point, and the feedback has been positive. So that's what I know.
Yeah, and I mean, if you've ever had some experience with the post office, sometimes it takes a little bit to get a response, and they like it, they like the plan, but they march to their own drum at times.
Well, just today, Jeff, how long has the post office been there? Everybody could answer that.
Yeah.
Today I got an email, certified letter from the post office saying they don't have any portable water, and their lease requires potable water. Now, they've been there for I don't know how long, and they just today said, "Where's our water?" So I'm like, well, we didn't even know you didn't have it. So they are not quick to react.
Thank you, guys. That's really all I have for questions.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks. Like I mentioned last time, we're not deciding on the Slindy proposal tonight. Now, for those people that are in attendance and in the neighborhood and concerned, we have looked at it. We have had some positive feedback, but we've had a lot of requests, I would say, from Plan Commission to change some things, some massing, some more commercial, a few things like that. The applicants are aware of that, and when we do see it again, I assume we'll see a bit of a revised proposal. But for tonight, as a planner, when I look at that parcel, I just can't see the city being successful with retail that far off Monona Drive. We really struggle in a lot of our locations with retail when it's not right on a major thoroughfare. And the bowling alley always pulled it in because it was a destination business. It was great for that. And that's the only reason when we recodified that we continued with retail zoning there. So whether the Slindy proposal goes ahead or any other proposal, I think by far and away the most appropriate zoning for this parcel is CDD, so we can have some type of a mix of retail and residential, because that's what the appropriate use in that area would be.
Great, thank you, Chris. Anything else?
No, I'm good on that.
Okay. Rob?
And nothing much has changed for me from the last time. I think it's appropriate. I think it's compatible with adjacent uses, and it's consistent with the development trends, kind of in that corridor, just off of Monona Drive. So I think CDD is appropriate.
Thank you. Corrine?
I have nothing to add. I agree with the others.
Okay, thank you. Susan Fox?
Nothing to add. I'm in agreement with the comments that have been made already, and with regard to the post office, I guess I would also note that they're currently in what's phase 2 of this project, so it would be a pretty seamless transition into when the new project, when the first phase is completed. So no, I think it's appropriate and support it.
Thank you. Patrick?
I would have to echo the same thoughts as the rest of the commission. I don't really have a problem with it. As a small business owner, I agree with Chris that it would be really hard to have something that was only retail there. I'm very conscious of where I place my restaurants and that sort of thing, and it's definitely not something that I would look at as a fantastic place for just retail. So I think CDD is absolutely appropriate.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. With that, do I have a motion? Chris?
I'd like to make a motion starting with a finding of fact that with the closing of Village Lanes Bowling Alley, the Plan Commission feels that these parcels are no longer suitable for zoning of strictly retail business. CDD zoning will allow a more flexible zoning and allow a mix of commercial and residential uses. And with that, we make the recommendation to City Council that they approve this parcel for the requested rezoning to CDD.
Thank you. I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second.
I have a second from Corrine and from Patrick, for that matter. But Corrine jumped in first. So I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Great. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Slins. Now we'll move to number 5C. Public hearing on the request by Joel Densing for approval of a zoning permit to operate a retail motor vehicle dealership at 915 Femrite Drive, case number 2-026-2021. Joel.
How's it going?
Good, how are you tonight?
Not too bad.
Would you introduce yourself and present for us, if you would, please? Start us off.
So since we met last time, I reviewed the video of the pre-hearing and then addressed all those concerns in a new application to Doug. I don't know if you guys got a chance to see that.
Mm-hmm. We have it in our packet.
Okay. So do you guys have any questions for me?
Well, we may have questions for you, but that would be after the public hearing. That would be in the next session. So this is your opportunity to speak on the proposal.
I mean, I think we covered it pretty well last time, and I'm confident with what I presented in the new application to Doug. I guess I don't know that there's much to add to that. I think if it's on our next one that we've got questions, you know, there's some questions I have regarding like potential conditions, but I don't know if that's for this thing or for the next.
That'll be in just one moment when we're done with this public.
Yeah, that will be in one moment.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, then I'm good.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Is there anybody here, Chris?
I just wanted to add that it's helpful for the people that are here to find out about the proposal if the applicant gives a brief overview of what they're proposing and what they've changed and what's going on, because as the general public, it's really hard to know what to talk about when he hasn't described what he's proposing.
Right.
This is their first time.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Good point. Joel, could you just give an overview? And you don't have to go all the way back to the last session, but if you could just give an overview of what you're proposing based from this evening.
Sure. So it's a retail motor vehicle dealership at 915 Femrite. It was previously the Treasure Mart, which was retail sales, and then I guess I'll be continuing in that in retail sales.
Can you provide a little bit more commentary on what changes you made from the last application to the one that's in the packet now?
Yeah, so initially I had requested hours from 6 a.m. till 12 a.m. And then this one I adjusted it from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Also, there was questions regarding lighting, so I had a project manager from Spectrum Lighting come out and assess the site. He felt that it was safe, adequate, and compliant, and then that kind of falls in line with the, I guess, the council's approval of the Paws Aquatic Center without any change to lighting. And then I drew up a scale drawing to illustrate the parking. I think for the most part that was the differences.
Okay. Okay, great. We'll get, as I said, we'll get to the questions during the next section.
Sure.
We have received quite a few comments, which Brian will reference again in the next section, or Brian, you can do it now. And if there's anybody again that's here to speak on this specific proposal during the public hearing portion, you may do so.
Yep, just ask if you're in person to raise your hand, or if you're virtual, either turn on your camera and raise your hand, or use the hands up icon on Zoom so we know you'd like to speak. Anyone wishing to speak on this application?
Are we still speaking about the...
Don't see any hands. Is there anybody at City Hall?
1 second, Madam Chair. We're not on the BMO Harris development quite yet. We'll be there in a couple minutes. Yep. Okay. Anyone wishing to speak on the 915 Femrite Road application that's presently before the Planning Commission? Okay. I see no one in the audience here at City Hall or at the library.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Then we will close the public hearing on this particular proposal at 915. Femrite, and we'll move to 5D, consideration of action on the request by Joel Dunsig for approval of a zoning permit to operate a retail motor vehicle dealership at 915 Femrite Drive, case number 2-026-2021. Brian, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, thank you. Again, just a quick summary of the application that's before you for consideration. It's a request for approval of a zoning permit to operate a retail motor vehicle dealership. As the applicant mentioned, in the former Treasure Mart building, a proposed use would be vehicle sales and military vehicle restoration by appointment. The current zoning of the property is Community Design District. Planning Commission previously held a pre-hearing on this application at their December 13th meeting. The guidance in the comprehensive plan guides the parcel for commercial, so this would be a corresponding use to that. Recommendation from staff is approval of the zoning permit for new use with the conditions of approval that are listed in the staff report. I believe there are 7 of them. And in addition, we received a number of written items of public comments on this application that were forwarded to the Plan Commission, and those will be incorporated into the record for this application. With that, we'll take any questions either for staff or for the applicant on this specific application.
Thank you, Brian. With that, I'm going to start with Chris this time.
Okay. We did get a lot of feedback from the residents. I understand they don't want this business, but as the applicant said, this was the Treasure Mart, and honestly, I don't think this will create any more traffic than the Treasure Mart, and certainly well below the levels of a lot of the other businesses in that area. So traffic, I don't think is an issue for this application. There's a number of things I believe are. The applicant's saying 7 to 10 p.m. The neighborhood's asking for 8, so I recommend we go to 9. I think that's when Menards closes or something close to that. And if I'm right, I'd like to ask the applicant, you can't be open on Sunday, is that correct? State laws?
No motor vehicle sales can occur on Sunday, but the business can be open.
Okay. Okay, but you can't have it. There can't be sales. So business be open would be people working inside on repair, or somebody just on a Sunday browse walking through your lot.
Yeah, so customers will tour the lot whenever. I mean, you're probably aware of that with your vehicle shopping.
Yeah.
But regarding sales, no contracts will be filled out on Sunday. Other than that, yeah, regular business stuff can happen.
Yeah. Okay. Because I saw that some of the neighbors were concerned about Sunday traffic, but I just don't believe with that line you're allowed to have much Sunday traffic.
Yeah, there will be.
A couple more comments. I didn't realize, I was wondering why you went where you did with your parking plan, and when I was out there, I actually paced your lot, and I think it's only a neighborhood of 56 feet wide, which puts you in a tough situation for double-sided parking. So I understand why you went to the short stalls and the narrow drive. One place we would need to change would be on the 4, what do you call them, customer stalls? I think we'd almost have to make those into maybe 3 customer stalls, 10 foot wide, because for you to park cars there on display, you can jockey them back and forth, round and round, but for a customer, by any of our codes, to have a 23-foot drive aisle, you need that 10 foot of width. And, you know, as you said, you probably aren't going to have 3 customers there at a time anyways. Normally, we would require an island at the end of that parking with a tree or something in it. I think being this was an existing setup and there's other areas that need work, I would be of the opinion we wouldn't worry about that, because I'm more concerned about the landscaping along Femrite Drive and fixing that up, which, speaking of that, we will need a plan to approve for that. It's not a good faith thing to fix it when you can. The landscaping is a requirement of an approval.
Sure,
So,
yeah. It seemed like it was based on city approval at the end anyway. And then looking through the Pause Aquatic application in minutes, there was no landscape plan for that, and it was approved, and there was no condition regarding a landscape approval required either, or a landscape permit or whatever.
Actually, we did talk about landscaping. I don't recall the specific condition, but
I've got
let me speak, please.
Wasn't anything.
This is a little different use than the aquatic one. You're going to have vehicles parked there all the time, full time. So there's a little more screening required for this, and a little more thought that needs to go into how this is going to look from the rest of it.
Can you cite the requirements for screening for a retail dealership?
So if I could finish, my opinion is that we will need a landscape plan, and we will need to approve it, and it'll have to be a timeline on when it's installed because of this use. And for me, I would rather have the landscaping being a concern along Femrite and turning that corner on the what would that be, the east side, than worrying about a tree island on the other area. Moving on, I think, again, based on what everybody else says, we'll need to get a revised parking plan showing the ability for customers to get into those stalls. I think we need to have some timeline for the exterior improvements to that building. The building is unsightly. And so I think at some point in time, we need to have a schedule for what can be done, at least to get a start on fixing that building back up. Probably at the minimum, a paint or something like that. We talked about this before, but there'll need to be a condition that the only outdoor advertising allowed is the state required information sheet that goes in the car window. We don't allow antenna hangers or flapping banners or anything like that trying to attract people to it. And then another condition I would recommend would be that any major repair work has to take place indoors. I would recommend the hours from 7 to 9. I did look at the lighting. It isn't in compliance with what our code is, but it's adequate. There's I call it dusted on, like a farm light right over the front door. So it's not a shielded light, but it's worked there and there hasn't been complaints over it. And then there's another similar light by the back door. And I think that's probably just fine for what the applicant is proposing. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Rob?
As far as the general use, I don't have an issue with that. I'm not concerned so much with traffic or noise, given that it's not going to be an auto repair place. My biggest concern is the parking plan. I don't think it's accurate. I've taken county gas aerials just to pull off some measurements, and it looks like it's about, which are pretty accurate. Typically, you've got about 71 feet from on that right up on by Femrite. Speaking of, you have about 71 feet width there, and so divide that by 8. That's 8.87 stalls. You show 10 stalls.
Sure. If you look at
and
that
that's
corner,
going all the way to the boulders. So that's if you're parking on the boulders, and that means you're not parking on paved areas, which I have an issue with, unless you're planning on repaving part of the parking lot as part of your striping plan. Furthermore, the distance between the double row parking from Femrite up to the building, you have about 23 feet based on GIS measurements, which gives you 23 feet drive aisle, which is less than desirable, and that's accounting for if you put the nose of the car, right up against the building. Again, I think there's some discrepancies about how many stalls you can fit along the building side, given that you have an accessible spot as well. Width of the drive aisle along the west property, that's a varied width. It's not 24 feet in every scenario. So you don't have a complete drive aisle at 24, which is ideal. Furthermore, you have boulders all up against that wall that you would have to account for pushing back unless you're moving those boulders along the building side. Furthermore, towards the back of the building, there is an entrance with a canopy, and you show parking all the way through that. I don't know if you intend to demolish that and relocate that entrance door.
there was existing parking in front of that door?
Your plan does not reflect that. It doesn't show an accurate depiction of what's there. So I'm going off of what you presented and what I've seen. So
Sure. And then you had mentioned that there's 23 feet.
just a second. You said you had the lights analyzed. Did you have photometrics to share, or how was that done? Did you go out there?
Yeah, I had someone from Spectrum come out and then take a look.
What is that? I don't know what that means.
Yeah,
So
I guess,
if we're getting lighting review, you usually get photometrics and cut sheets about what we're seeing.
sure. I guess I'd.
I don't know if that was information you had and hadn't provided. I just wanted to ask the question.
Yeah, I don't have anything on it. The guy came out, looked, we spoke. Obviously, he offered me, upgrades and this and that, but in the end, it was adequate. And I think your approval of the pause kind of speaks to that in addition.
Those are my concerns with it.
Okay.
Ultimately, I don't think this plan represents how the site will function.
Yeah, and then, so if you look at the Monona parking zoning code, it's 480 attachment 2.9, 90-degree parking for an 8-foot wide stall. Aisle is 23 feet. So 23 feet is adequate for back to like double parking between Femrite and the building.
Does your parking stall go up to the building face? Because that's the difference. Typically, a parking stall wouldn't go up to the face of the building.
Yeah, I mean, I was out there with a tape measure. I mean, maybe my tape measure was wrong. Maybe Chris's shoe size is more than 12 inches. I don't know. But in the end, it's like, yeah, it's going to be finalized. Doug's going to come out and probably put a tape measure on it. All the boulders are going to go away. You mentioned you looked at an aerial, and then from the driveway to the other end, the parking lot doesn't seem as wide as it does. If you look back to that aerial right now, you'll see the parking lot appears to be rounded, and there's like grass growing there. That's 40 years of sediment just laying on top of asphalt. I scraped it with a flat shovel, and there's asphalt underneath it. So, I mean, that's not that hard to believe given, just the sight of those 40-year-old shrubs in front of the building.
Chris?
I just wanted to interject for the commission members that aren't aware of the standard that the applicant's citing. It's our standard is 9 by 18 is the typical with the 20-foot drive aisle, but the standard he's looking at, we have a supplemental section that's for small cars, for small vehicles, which we rarely, if ever, use, but what he's citing is the small vehicle. We have large and medium vehicles, which would have our standard dimensions, and then small vehicles. So it's a little bit of what he's proposing is a little bit of a push. The reason I totally agree with Rob. I don't think you can fit what he's proposing there, but that's easy. You can put a tape measure on it. But where it's substandard for the drive aisle and the distance, this is basically cars that'll be parked there for long periods of time. So I would not be as worried about the maneuvering getting out of that stall with multiple trips a day and opening doors. Most car lots do park the cars a little closer together, and they are real careful when they get in and out so they don't slam doors. And I believe that's what he's going after with this proposal, because he only has, give or take, 56 feet. And we're not going to agree to taking out more landscaping and putting in more asphalt in that frontage, because it's already short enough of green space as it is. So I think for him to have adequate use of this parking lot, that's where Rob, I mentioned, it's not our code. It's our code for a small vehicle, and I'm sure there'll be larger vehicles parking there, but for long-term parking, for long-term storage, might be a week, might be a month, I don't know how long those cars will be there. You could get by with that, and you could make it functional. So that's why I commented the way I did. But I wanted the commission to understand why we have these conflicting requirements, and that's small car versus medium and large.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Rob, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that comment. But I stand by, I don't think you're fitting that many cars up front. I just have a problem with the accuracy of what I'm looking at.
Right.
And that's going to the boulders, which surely are in a landscape bed despite any sediment placement. And then also there's, as part of your application was talk of military vehicles, and I think you stated that you have Humvees, military Humvees, which are exceptionally wide, I believe.
How wide do you think it is?
Are they wider than a standard vehicle?
Make a guess. I want to hear.
I'm not here to guess.
Yeah, you said it was exceptionally wide. So what's your definition of exceptionally wide?
wider than a
He's
traditional
asking
vehicle.
you a question, you need to answer him. It's not up to Rob to guess.
Sure.
This isn't a guessing game, just answer the question.
Yep, it was more along the lines of somebody making an assumption to kind of discredit something I've done. The Humvee's 84 inches wide. I fit it on a standard car trailer. It parks in normal parking spaces, and it's exactly the same width as the civilian Hummer H1 that was offered for sale to the retail public. So it's no different than any approved vehicle that anyone can own and drive and park anywhere they like.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
So it's
Thank you,
7
Rob.
feet wide.
Susan?
Yeah, I had similar thoughts about the parking in the front piece, in that it's possible, it looks like to me like you might only get 8 stalls across Femrite. And then the customer parking, where you have those outlined as 8, I think those have to be wider. I mean, I would think they have to be standard too, which might mean you have one fewer there too, or you might have to put one on the other side. But that's, that's something that would, I think, have to be addressed.
Sure.
I guess 2 things. One, I do agree that the landscaping along Femrite and then probably along the eastern side is going to be the most important. I think what's different, I think some of the negative feedback we got with regard to traffic, I don't share. I think some of that was because people were picturing more of an active, regular car lot. I mean, what you're doing is a little bit different. And I think one sent a picture of a car lot, and this is not going to look like that. However, you are going to have all those cars parked on Femrite, and I think that does need to be screened just because it has been. When the Treasure Mart was there, it was set back a bit. You keep mentioning the last applicant at the Aquatic Paws place. That was also going to have fewer cars coming, but there wasn't going to be a car lot. And I think that's one of the concerns of the neighbors. I do not share the concerns they've raised with traffic because I agree with what's already been said. I don't think that's going to be an issue with the kind of business you're talking about. However, given the fact that there will be cars there all the time, I think it is important to keep that in mind with the neighborhood and with the landscaping plan, and that does need to come in. To the Plan Commission, we typically do see that at some point. Whether the commissioners will agree to let that be staff approval, I don't know. We typically don't. We typically do request that come back. So that's one thing. I guess the other thing is, there was another question about what kind of military vehicles. We've just had Humvees mentioned. Can you give me an idea of what other kinds of vehicles you have, or is that mostly what you deal with?
That's all I mean, basically, so I had started out just because I wanted one. I'd wanted one since I was a kid, so I was just buying them and enjoying them for myself. But no, I don't really have any interest in other types of
Like tanks and that kind of thing.
No,
I think that's what people, seriously, I think that's what people think when they see that, so,
Sure.
okay.
My son would want me to get a tank. I suppose if I could, maybe I would, I don't know.
Otherwise, I agree with the comments that have already been said. We did talk with the Paws Aquatic people as well about the shape that building was in. It does need to be perked up. And at some point, Chris has already mentioned the signage on the cars. There would be a separate application for a sign, I assume, whether you're going to have one just on the building and that might be all you need there. Again, given the nature of your building. I don't really have, I guess the other question was raised was noise of the pneumatic, removing the lug nuts and that kind of thing. And would that kind of work would be done inside also, right? So
inside.
I mean, that was my understanding last time, that any work like that would be, even as an inspector, you'd pull them in for the inspector to look at them.
Well, so I am the inspector, but yeah, they'll be inside.
Okay, so I guess that's, all of these are things that I think the neighbors who responded didn't really fully understand. So I think it's helpful for them to hear that the noise isn't that much. You've already got a car replaced behind you. Yours is going to be done inside. That's a huge factor. So, yeah, I don't have concerns other than that. So with that, that's all I have.
Thank you, Susan. Corinne?
So going off of what Susan just said, I think she made a good point that, the neighbors do have concerns, and so doing whatever you can to answer those questions, address their concerns is important. And I think, if they had the time to read this, or if they were able to get it on the website, they would probably understand it a little bit more. But speaking to the landscaping concerns as well, There was one comment about putting some additional landscaping on the northeast corner of the lot, and that's where those boulders are. And I do think that that would go a long way to just being a good neighbor. If they're concerned about seeing cars on the lot, and that's something that's relatively simple to do, that would be something that would be good to include in a landscaping plan. We also did talk about, I was trying to remember what the Pause Aquatic, I know we talked about freshening up that building. Did we talk about painting? Does anyone remember if we talked about painting that front part?
We did.
Okay, because you mentioned painting the trim and the doors, but it would be good to freshen up I don't even know what that material is, but the light blue probably used to be a darker blue color. And the comments about the customer parking stalls, I agree with as well. I know in your application you said that you anticipate that just with the trends in car sales and what people are looking to buy, there's more of a trend toward smaller or electric vehicles. And that might be true, but your customers coming in are probably maybe going to be like me with my minivan wanting to park in the, in the stall. So I agree with that having larger customer spaces is important. And I won't go into the parking more than that. I agree with the hours as well that Chris mentioned, 7 to 9. And I had a question about the lot itself. It doesn't sound like you have plans to resurface. I did have a question about that corner, but you answered that by saying that it was mostly just a sediment that you can pull up because we don't want to have cars parking on what looks like grass or dirt.
Right, that's the lowest corner, so everything kind of washes there, and then it just sits there kind of stagnant. And I imagine without them having pressure washing the lot for 40 years, it accrued, and now grass grows on it. But yeah, I scraped at it with a shovel, and there's asphalt underneath.
Okay. And then there was a discussion of striping the ADA space, but what about striping the rest of the lot? Is that in your plans as well? Because we would need the lot to be striped.
Ideally, I would prefer not to, because I don't know if you've noticed any dealerships, typically they just put like a bumper line. So they'll put a line where the front lines of the cars all line up, and then they'll just park them according to what cars are there. So smaller cars, big cars, whatever, and they all kind of line up to the line, so you have nice straight rows and it looks appealing. So there's typically not individual stalls on a dealership. If I wasn't required to put the individual stalls, I wouldn't do it. If you require it, I'll paint the individual stalls.
I think we would for sure need striping on the customer stalls. I guess I'd be curious to hear just commissioners who've been on longer if we've ever had a different response to that. In 1 second, I think I had one more thing. Maybe not. I guess that was it. Okay. Thank you.
Patrick?
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add that hasn't already been said. Looking at the hours, 7 to 9, I think seems appropriate. I don't think anybody's going to have a problem with someone in there doing office work past that time or that sort of thing. I don't think that's anyone's intention. When they talk about hours, I think what people are talking about is, outside activity, things that are disturbing, that sort of thing. But I don't think anybody's going to worry about somebody doing paperwork or getting something done quietly later than that inside the building. I'd like to make sure that, we stipulate that there's no storage, and we might have already done this, but no storage of any damaged cars outside that are waiting to be fixed or adjusted. The exterior of the building, we talked about painting that. A landscaping plan is needed. Screening some of that from across the street would be great. So again, I think that's pretty much all I have at this point. Yep.
Thank you. Christine?
Thank you. Yeah, most things have been covered. I'm glad to hear the boulders are going to be removed. I think some uniform screening, especially as a nice gesture for the neighbors who are concerned about having to look at cars. I am curious too to see the landscape plan, because I think the drawing that you gave us, it doesn't quite, the dimensions that you have right up against Femrite, I don't think it allots for the shrubs that are there. And the shrub that's kind kind of like, it looks like it's about 6 feet in from the entrance, the big arborvitae. So yeah, I would like to see the landscape plan, but I also agree with the hours. I think 7 to 9 is really adequate, and I can't imagine that you're going to be out there selling cars at 11 at night. And since the neighbors have expressed concerns about that, I think that would be a really good goodwill gesture as well, because we're not saying you can't be doing work on the inside. So thank you.
Great. Any other comments, questions before? This is a consideration of action. Do we have a motion, Chris?
Yeah, before I make the motion, I would like
Madam
to
Chair,
just-
Madam Chair, sorry, the applicant has a question.
Yep.
I've got loads of questions, so I was waiting for you guys to get all done.
Okay.
So if you guys are all done with your questions.
Well, I think Chris was going to either say something or ask a question first.
Okay, Chris, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to make an explanation. Corinne had asked about the parking, and no, we normally ask for a parking lot plan and striped, and since a condition of this approval is that all the vehicles are in an approved stall, I've done a lot of car dealerships. Most of them are required to stripe, but I personally wouldn't have a problem if our approved stall on the parking lot plan that applicant presents is this area that we all see as, for example, on the west side of the building that goes out 18 feet, and it's the length of the building, which would mean then that any vehicles that are parked there need to be in the parking area, because he'll have different width vehicles, he'll have all kinds of different things, but the intent of our approval would be that it's in that approved area and lined up. Same thing with the ones along Femrite. Certainly in the front of the building, I think we have to have striping. We have to have striping for customers, for the ADA, for a couple things there. So my response to you for that would be, we could probably, if the commission's okay with it, come up with some flexibility on it, but there still has to be something on that plan that shows where these vehicles are going to be parked, so it doesn't become that picture that the neighbors submitted. And I would just like to address the applicant. I mean, it sounds, I've been where you are, and it's like you're up there and we're telling you, everybody's here telling you what you have to do with your property, and it's frustrating. And what you don't understand is there's a lot of concessions that have already been made by the Plan Commission. This isn't what we would do to a new project or something else. There's a lot of things we aren't asking for. I know this seems like a lot, but there are some concessions. We just have to be sensitive that you are in what's become a residential neighborhood, so we just want to make sure that we're a good neighbor. And somebody else mentioned that before. The best thing you can do in this business is just be a good neighbor. If you have somebody come in there at 11 o'clock at night to look at a car, if I were you during your normal business hours, I would get that car pulled inside, and when somebody comes there at 11 and comes inside, you two are looking at that car inside, no neighbor's going to mind that. I don't think anybody's going to even know you're there doing it. But we have to put some limits on it for the neighborhood. So that being said, go ahead and let me know what all your questions are.
I guess, like,
Go ahead.
Oh, thanks. I guess because you left off with time, if we start with time, I don't know if we can split the difference at 10 p.m. I'd initially asked for midnight. You guys are saying 9. Menards was previously open until 10 before the pandemic. Likely after the pandemic, they might extend their hours back to 10. The church across the street has very often, I guess I don't know what is happening, if it's Bible study or church groups or whatever. They're constantly there until like after 10 p.m. The church next door, 901 Femrite, they just open their doors, from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. overnight during sub-zero temperatures. So they've got people coming and going from 8 p.m. through 6 a.m. There's plenty of activity on that street beyond 9 p.m. So I think asking for like sort of an official, if we can agree to 10 p.m., I think that's reasonable on both sides.
So I think what I'm hearing people say is essentially that 9 o'clock is your official business hours, but it would be 9 o'clock and then by appointment, which is to say, again, if, as Patrick mentioned, as several other people mentioned, if you had somebody after 9 o'clock that wanted to look at a car or needed to see you about something, or you were there doing paperwork or whatever, as with any other business, including a restaurant, obviously, after they close the doors, it's not like you can't be in the building. But I think what I'm hearing people, so the flexibility is there if somebody wants to make an individual appointment with you after 9 o'clock. is what I think I'm hearing, although we don't have a motion on the floor yet, but that, it sounds like that's what we've heard from commission members.
Okay, all right, so that was regarding time. I saw in the that mobile pressure washing approval that you guys had conditioned there be no consignment sales. I guess initially I don't have any plans to do consignment sales, but I don't see any reason why to be conditioned against it, because for specialty vehicles like classic cars or very high value cars, consignment sales do work. So any reason that can be allowed or like not conditioned against?
Chris?
I don't believe any of the recommended conditions talk about that, and at least what I had, I didn't have that. But the reason being, and just so you understand, we had a real problem in Monona years ago with every business up and down Monona Drive taking a buddy's car and having it for sale. We actually passed an ordinance that said you can't have cars for sale on your property that aren't yours. You're a used car lot. You have some pretty tight conditions here. You can't put big flags on it and it's for sale, special today. You can have the sign in the window that the state requires, and you can advertise online all you want, but it's not going to be what we had a problem with on Monona Drive. And being a car dealership, so to speak, I think people expect to see different cars there. So for me, I will answer, I know why we did it. I know why we had that ordinance. To me, it's okay here. I wouldn't recommend a condition of no consignments. As long as they hold all other conditions. They have to be in one of those stalls, and they can't have that extra advertising. I don't see any reason not to allow that.
Sure, and I don't make a point to, like, that's not even part of the plan, but it would be, like I said, likely for either very high-end cars or classics. One other thing would be, I saw in Doug's notes that he had made mention of something about like no service or oil change or something like that. And so during, let's say for instance, during the safety inspection, the most common things are tires and brakes. So I have the wheels off, I'm measuring the brake pad thickness or whatever. Brake pad thickness is at a certain amount that I would choose to replace it. Well, it's 2 bolts away from changing it, so I don't see any reason to put the car back together, take it somewhere, have brake pads put on it, when 2 bolts later, I'd had the caliper off and put pads on it. Pads are available across the street at Pioneer Rim and Wheel. So really, when it comes to servicing my own stuff, I have no interest in being service center to the public, but servicing my own stuff inside, I guess, during the inspection process.
Yeah, and just for a point of clarification for the commission, so the condition that he's referencing that City Planner Plowman put in the report was that no repairs or maintenance activities requiring drainage of oil or grease shall be prepared or performed on site without prior review and approval of the Planning Commission. So it's not saying that repair activities could not occur on site, just saying if they involve the drainage for oil or grease, that would be prohibited without additional Planning Commission approval.
Okay, so what would that approval entail?
I'm not an auto mechanic, so I can't give you any more specifics on that. So if it
No, I mean the approval by you. Like, what else would you need to, like, again, for instance, same scenario, you're checking the car, you got it up, wheels are off of it, and then the oil change reminder on the dash says there's 3% oil life left before it needs to be changed. Well, while the rest of the inspection is happening, it could be, that could just be done.
Sure.
So then what would the city need for?
We would need to, well, I think first and foremost, we need to have a plan for how you would deal with that oil or grease so that it's not just being run down the city's storm sewer system. I think that's the intent, is if you were to offer additional car maintenance services, we'd need some more additional information as to how you do that in the space, how you deal with the removal of any of the oil or grease or any other items that would come out of the car.
Sure. So like a written plan, like how this will be, handled as far as the storage and then disposal.
Written plan, and then also probably a site plan of the actual building showing where that drainage is going to go. So we can.
It wouldn't be any drain within. It would be like probably drain to a 55-gallon drum. I contacted a couple of like Crystal Clean is one, and then I think one of the waste management companies offers like waste oil disposal. Mm-hmm. So typically you store it in a drum and then they come and pump it out. Like above ground, not like in a tank underground.
Sure.
Chris, did you have a question?
Did you have a question about that? Yeah.
I made a comment on it. I tend to agree with the applicant on this, that to be able to do some light mechanic work and things, one of the primary things I would want to do in there is change oil and have fresh oil in the car that I'm going to sell. So I think with what the city administrator talked about is just that conditions saying you can't do it, just that he needs to have a plan in place and review it with, I would suspect, the fire department. I don't know who, but I expect city staff, but I don't see us saying you can't change oil in a place that's selling cars, and we've already have conditions that it would have to be inside.
Sure. Susan?
Well, so given that, could you word that condition something like, activities requiring drainage for oil or grease prior to submission of a plan to city staff, something like that?
Yeah, that'd be
And
excellent.
would that
So as
cover
long as we
that?
can- Yep.
And I guess I also, the time, if we say hours of operation shall be from 7 to 9, and then we're at the same time, I understand it's totally okay if somebody's in their building longer, but then when we talk about him making an appointment, having someone come in, I'm okay with that, but I guess I'm a little worried about how to word that condition if we do that. If it would be something like hours of operation shall be 7 to 9, or by appointment. So, I mean, I think it should be clear in there so he doesn't have to come running back, or people can't if they see a car go in and somebody goes in. I mean, I don't know. I personally would have been okay with 10, but if we're going to say 9, I think it makes sense to say or by appointment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would, when I brought it up, Susan, I was just saying that that's what I thought I was hearing from the commission, that there,
But it actually be worded in the conditions, what I was saying, okay. Fine. That's all I had, thanks.
Anyone else? Joel, did you have other questions?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
So it sounds like landscaping is a pretty important topic tonight. So regarding the landscaping within the zoning printout, I printed the zoning code for the city of Monona, and it talks about where it's required, and it sounds like it's required if it's exactly like directly across the street from a residential area, regarding like screening, headlight glare, and then also it mentions that public safety is important. So Chris, you said you were in the parking lot. Like you noticed that exiting the parking lot, the driveway climbs up to meet the height of the street, and then the parking lot, like the cars parked on the west side of facing Femrite, are below the height of the driveway and below the height of the curb or the sidewalk. I just put a level on it, measured it. The parking lot sits more than 2 feet lower than the sidewalk. Currently, the shrubs are they're grossly overgrown, but when leaving that parking lot, you can't see anyone on the sidewalk whatsoever. Like someone could be 2 feet from the driveway, and then you basically have to have your car over or 2 feet from the sidewalk. You have to be over the sidewalk before you can see down there. Given the fact that the driveway climbs to meet the sidewalk, and then the parking lot sits lower, and then Femrite falls like as you go it's east. That would be right towards Menards. So ideally, screening would be tapering in height from the west side of the parking lot along Femrite, where it would be very low at that side, and then it could be increasing in height as it goes towards the east side of the Femrite, fronting Femrite. Does that make sense?
Chris?
Yeah, Chris?
Yeah, you're making some sense. These are details to work out with Doug when you create your landscape plan. I think everybody on the commission would agree that the landscaping that's there is overgrown. The intent was to be down low and screening, and they trimmed all that up, and you've got 10-foot tall trees that don't do a lot, or 8-foot tall. So I think those are good points. As something to go over with Doug. The intent is to screen these vehicles, both the headlights and to make it so it doesn't just look like there's a used car lot there. No offense, but it's to just take the eye away from it. It doesn't mean you can't see anything there. Sure. But those are the kind of details you should work with Doug on, because there will be a condition that you come back with a landscape plan to be approved.
You just lost all audio.
You can't hear me?
No, I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
We can hear you, Patrick.
So I think you know what the intent is, and that's work out the details, and then it comes back to Plan Commission. We look at it at that point, we can respond to it when we see what you're thinking.
Yeah, Joel, and I would just add to what Chris has said, that also applies to the painting, which is to say that with the things that we've talked about tonight, the landscaping, the planting, the other things we want to see on the site, you can work out the details with Doug about, you know, the timing of when we need to see that by, when we need to see the painting done by, et cetera. That's not something we need to detail tonight. I mean, it's not like we're saying you have to have the painting done next week, right? I mean, we're prepared as a commission to be, you know, to be reasonable, recognizing that any small business, getting up and running for any small business is a challenge. So in some cases, we'll ask you to come back to the commission. In other cases, assuming there's some sort of a motion that comes forward, in other cases, we'll say it can be approved by staff, but the actual timing of it or the color of the building or those types of things are things that you just work out with. It can work out with, you know, either with staff or, like as I said, you know, in some cases, like with the landscape review, you might want to have you back. It depends on the motion. But we don't need all the details tonight is my point around that. And it sounds like we want to see some more detail, and there may be a condition around some of the detail around the parking as well, since the parking drawing was a little wonkish. Other questions?
For me or by me?
From you.
From
yeah.
So like you had mentioned timing to complete certain things. I saw in Doug's notes it was something like, I don't know, June or July, probably 6 months from today, right?
Correct.
But then, so it must be typical, right? You give people 6 months. 3 of my 6 months will be too cold to do any sort of painting or landscape. So in effect, it's kind of like my 6 months is shortened to 3. So, like, let's say we were here hypothetically in October, 6 months would burn up before anyone could do anything. So I guess I would ask for a little bit longer than 6 months, considering, well, it's super cold right now.
There isn't a 6 months. There isn't anything. I'm not sure where you got that. We usually give people 6 months. We just, you know, there isn't an automatic. We give people 6 months. We're you know, it's safe to say that the city obviously and we want to work with you.
Sure, I guess I was
in the recommendation it mentioned that, but it said the landscaping plan by then, not that the landscaping be done, but it did say the striping be done. It didn't say anything about the painting or any of that. So
yeah, and I guess I got the 6 months from
plan.
It appeared
It's
that,
plan, not actually accomplished. I think.
Yeah, it seemed like it was also 6 months when you had conditioned the Paws Aquatic Center there. So I figured it was kind of 6 months from your meeting was kind of standard issue. And I was just thinking timing-wise, well, right now we're in the middle of January, so 6 months is really 3 months.
For the benefit of the Plan Commission, do you have an alternative time frame you'd suggest?
Oh, in my application I did. I said September 15th.
Okay. Chris?
Why I'm not muted. I just wanted to explain 6 months is not typical. We generally ask for it before you move in. This is a property that's in really poor condition, and when we want to encourage you to do something and fix it up, and knowing that it's a hard, tough beginning for you, that's when we say, well, we'll give you 6 months, get moved in. And what that does, in the same way with the motion that would say you need to have a plan back to us in 2 months, but allows you, if you get your approval, to be in there and be functional now, and then work on your plan and get the plan back within a couple of months, and then a commitment to when the work would be done. So those are all, I think, extras that the Plan Commission's allowing, knowing that there's a lot of work to do on this property. And I think that's the way why it was worded the way it was.
Okay, I thought that was like more of a completed sort of like, if you don't have it done by this day, you violate your stuff and you pull my...
Well, it would be. If it has a date to be done by, then there's a date to be done by. And, you know, landscaping is pretty tough to do in July. Burns up anyhow, so I would think you'd want to get your landscaping in the spring before it gets too hot so you can maintain it, because you have an investment in that too.
Sure, yeah, but just the mix of everything. It was landscaping, starting the parking lot, do some paint on the building, awful lot of stuff to do in 3 months of good weather.
Right.
Yeah, and actually I misread that. It did say completed by July 24th, so.
Other questions, Joel?
I mean, I think that pretty much does it. I guess I would have questions if I knew what you're conditionally approving me with.
Chris?
I'll make a motion, but yeah, I would totally agree with that statement. So
Anyone second
I'll
that?
recommend approval with condition 1 is written by staff, condition 2 is written by staff, condition 3 that changes the hours of operation from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. with the caveat after that, extension of these hours will require plan commission approval. Condition 4 that says an oil and grease care and disposal plan shall be submitted to and approved by city staff. Condition 5, all cars parked outside shall be fully functional and parked in the designated parking areas. Condition 6, a landscape plan shall be submitted to Plan Commission for approval within 65 days with final completion by July 24th, 2022. Condition 7, that a revised parking lot plan shall be submitted to the Plan Commission within the next 65 days and with restriping, finished final restriping by July 24th based on tonight's input. Condition 8, that a plan for the building exterior improvements be submitted to Plan Commission within 65 days and completed by September 15th. Condition 9, that the only outdoor advertising allowed is the state on the vehicles is the state, the only outdoor advertising allowed is the state required information sheets in the car windows. Condition 10, that any major repair work be performed indoors. That's it.
Maureen?
We need a second first to discuss.
Yeah, okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a second. Now, Corinne, go ahead.
I think the landscaping, having the plan completed maybe in 3 months, and then having the actual landscape installation. I mean, the point you made about putting plants in summer, and that is a hard thing if it's a hot summer to keep those plants. I'm not sure if there's water on the exterior of the building. I don't know how so maybe Rob has a better sense for when to do the landscaping work, if September 30th would be a good time frame for completing landscaping work.
I think the sweet spots are the spring and the fall. Well, I know they are. Or the spring and the fall, unless there's irrigation, which I don't think there is. That said, people install landscapes all season long. It needs another month to complete that. I'm fine with that. 2 months. But I would agree with Chris that I would get it in the spring. You're going to get a better use of your investment. You get a full growing season of the plants established.
Okay. Chris?
I'm fine if these plans come back in 2 months or 3 months, because you can't do anything probably till April anyway. And the reason I said 65 days, I don't know how the days work out. We meet second and fourth Monday of every month, and some months, 31 days, so it goes a little over the 60 days. So if the second would be agreeable to it, we could say within 100 days that these plans all come back to us. That gives the applicant any time in the next 3 months to come back to Plan Commission with the plans, because frankly, I don't think you can even strike really before it gets warm outside. I think if it's a big deal to applicant to put the landscaping in by the 15th of September, that's okay. I think it'll be a big thing for the neighborhood to be able to get that in and see what it's looking like. The building facade, September 15th, it gets much after that, it's hard to paint. The striping, I think, is important to get in as soon as you can so people know where to park, especially customers.
Joel, since the original motion was to have part of the items that we're talking about, which is to say we had landscaping, striping, and painting. and we already delayed painting until September. Are you comfortable leaving the landscaping and the striping at the dates, at the dates that were originally proposed in the motion?
So that would be by July 24th? Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, those were the two that I would focus on first anyway, as far as instant improvement, and then striping the lines. That just makes sense.
Great. Terrific. Then we'll leave it the way it is. We'll leave the motion the way it is. Chris?
Just so I explain, there's a lot of dates and do this by then and that. The reason for that is so that you can get in there, start your business and occupy the building. You have a zoning permit, but the condition is that you have to come back to fulfill it. Otherwise, if we left these conditions, they had to be done before you could occupy it. You wouldn't be able to go in there until some of the stuff was done. So it's trying to make it a little easier for you to get started in there.
Well, that sounds good.
Okay, I have a motion, I have a second, and we've clarified on some dates. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
With that, we're going to move to item number 5E, public hearing on the request by Compass Properties in the Neutral Project for consideration of a zoning permit for construction of a new mixed-use building at approximately 4611 Monona Drive between Springhaven and Dean Avenue. Case number 2-016-2021. Welcome, Nate. And Douglas, welcome.
Thanks, Nancy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Go ahead, the floor is yours.
Brian, are you able to share a presentation by chance?
Yeah. Would it actually be possible to give me the ability to click to share screen and click through slides?
Sure.
If that's humanly possible.
1 second.
Thank you.
Okay, you should be able to share now.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Well, while Doug is pulling up our presentation, I'm going to give a little bit of brief history of where we've been and then where we're going tonight. And I want to thank everyone for having us here. We're really excited to be back. And we went kind of back to the drawing board after our last Plan Commission meeting with almost a full redesign initiative. And we really took your guys' comments to heart and came up with a couple of key categories that we said these are the areas of concern and probably the areas that we need to focus on moving forward with our redesign and hopefully a path towards approval. And so tonight, after discussions with Doug Plowman at the city, this would act as our formal pre-hearing. And then hopefully after we kind of collectively make a decision of where we're going, we'd be able to move forward with our approval process. And so a couple of those key concerns that we heard in the last Plan Commission meeting was mostly in regards to an increase in green area, so adding some sort of public park or green space. And we took that into consideration in this new model. A reduction in size, and one of the big kind of resounding concerns we heard was the size was just too large. And so we split up into actually 3 different massings this time. That was another portion that we heard, was to break up the massing a little bit and make it a little bit more neighborhood-esque. And so we added an element of townhomes that would be more suited for families and family support housing. The 4th one was to add an incubator space, and we would love to have a skate shop or a small new business come in and be a part of the incubator space. So we got to add a little incubator space. We're still not sure if we're going to actually charge rent for that, and if we do, it would be a very small rent. Then the last couple here was site circulation, which I'll let Doug touch a little bit more on. And then the parking ratio was a big concern. And the parking ratio, we're now within compliance of what the Monona requires for us for the amount of units that we have. And so we're within the code compliant parking ratio, which is great. And then a concern that was actually raised tonight by a neighborhood member was in regards to our exiting onto Gordon. And we've actually removed that altogether because we do see that as a concern from our end as well. And we don't want to have the kids have any concern there or parents. And so we've actually only done exiting now onto Dean because there's a light there. And so we're hoping to use that light as a way to do traffic flow. And we're also going to do a little bit more traffic steady once we reach kind of our design with Strand and have that go through the city's process as well. And then the last item was we looked at a couple of precedent projects with Doug Plowman. And one that was really interesting was Fairway Glen right down the street from us. And one of the items that was brought up in our last Plan Commission hearing was that it was too many units per acre and it was unprecedented. And we looked at Fairway Glen and we're actually just about under where Fairway Glen is per acre on a per unit basis. And so I think with those items and those points moving forward, we're hoping tonight we'll have a little bit better reception from both the neighborhood and Plan Commission, and we'll be able to formulate some sort of design that we can move forward with approvals in subsequent meetings. And so with that, I'll turn it over here to Doug to run through those different design elements, and then we'll open it up for questions. Thanks for having us.
Great, thank you, Nate, and thank you everyone for being here to hear our presentation. I'm just going to cut to the middle. 1 second. Okay, so as everyone is familiar with the site, it's this block here located between a kind of commercial corridor of Monona Drive and of course the residences and residential neighborhood behind. So in the redesign that Nate has described verbally, you can see here that in the center we've liberated a pedestrian access which formerly was much more to the north, and in doing so this breaks up this Monona massing or the facade along Monona to be a much more manageable or reasonable, let's say, size for the scale of all of the buildings along Monona, and taken that displaced mass for the area of the project and relocated it as well to the back of the property for townhouses, which we'll get into more detail in a minute. And also, as Nate mentioned, the site vehicular access is strictly off of Dean now rather than anything off of Gordon or Springhaven. So in considering this redesign, we also, of course, considered the context, which has its civic landmarks, has vernacular architecture with gables and shingles, has a more neoclassical feel to many of the surrounding public buildings, but also has a lot of public green space, all of which were important to us in the conception of this new project. As you can see here, these are views of the site from different angles, looking northwest, south, and southeast. So you can see that some buildings are, of course, meant to be demolished, while other aspects of the property are very much meant to be kept and even enhanced, including this green buffer that exists prominently around the site and the sidewalk, which we will actually work to continue around the entire property, which currently only really goes along Dean and Monona, not along Springhaven or Gordon. So we'll continue that kind of pedestrian experience around the property. And given the new massing and looking at the sun studies on the site, basically all of the sun shading is going to fall, or the shading throughout the year and day is going to So we looked, of course, at the parcel division and considered the mid block as a, let's say, a starting point for departure of the redesign, given that we really wanted to break up this massing along Monona, and as well in the previous meeting, the setback of the proposal was around 8 or so feet. And this was seen as insufficient, so we, per the council's recommendation, we pushed back to 14 feet at a minimum, sometimes even going, as you can see here, beyond 14 feet, almost 20. So the project really aims to push into the site itself and therefore be less imposing and on the city urban context, and really give a nice buffer of green to the project itself. As you can see here, also in the gray boxes, where this could be the maximum envelope, let's say, of the project. But in order to reduce the overall massing, either along Monona or as it goes as the project moves towards the residential neighborhood, we wanted to also step this massing and really create even a more neighborhood feeling for the rear townhouses, which again we'll see in a minute. So making these gestures to break up the massing and make it feel, let's say, smaller, both along or less imposing along Monona and on the neighborhood itself. So what we're here to do today is really to get your feedback on two proposals. We have an option A and option B. This, let's say, this would be our preferred scheme, but we're just open to your feedback. The scheme A proposes 127,000 gross square feet of let's say habitable space above ground, with another 50,000 or so below grade for parking. And in doing so, we free up a lot of the surface area on that grade to have a lot of public green space for the community, even a public garden, water retention, pond, etc. So, and then again, as mentioned, this kind of green buffer that wraps the site with the sidewalk. Here's the proposal from both the front and the back. But as you can see here in this diagram, we're showing what the previous proposal was in orange, and then what the current proposal is. So you can see that this mass of this facade has really been broken almost in half, and attempts to alleviate this kind of feeling of a massive block, especially when driving along Monona towards Dean and Springhaven to the north. And you can see it here again in axonometric. So to walk you a little bit through the plan, as Nate mentioned, there's an attempt at creating a mixture of retail that would very much service the community, and both the residents as well as the community at large, especially including this business incubator to help foster growth of future young entrepreneurs in the city of Monona. And really just help them to get started in the current economic climate. The townhouses are proposed in the back so the commercials all along Monona, Dean, and Springhaven with townhouses, walk-up townhouses, we might add as well. So all of the driving or the parking for the townhouses comes from behind, so these would all be walk-up single-family residences or townhouses. And then below grade parking, in total we have 89 units for the project and 180 parking spaces, so it more than exceeds the number of parking required per the unit types. And it's a good mixture of studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, and the townhouse component. So really, let's say quite a range of tenants, types of tenants, and from families to recent college graduates, and we think it will be a good diverse group of people for the neighborhood. In this scheme, scheme B, it's a very similar amount of square footage and a similar below grade parking. The difference is just the distribution of massing, with a larger L block on the corner extending a bit further towards the neighborhood, a single block here, and then the townhouses again to the west. You can see again from the front and the back, and again compared to that initial proposal that you had seen. The main difference here is this green public plaza extends basically all the way through the site, rather than being broken up by the townhouses. We have mixed feelings, but I mean, I think as a team we prefer the first scheme, which includes the public garden to the north west corner, which can better service the neighborhood. But in this scheme, we have the townhouses here, so again, one drives down, sufficient parking for the residents and partial staff with parking above grade for the businesses, restaurant, BMO Harris, etc. And again, this is a very similar mixture of studios to 3 bedrooms and townhouses. So then we took into consideration the context in which we're working in terms of building volume and massing. So we looked at the buildings that are roughly 10 to 14 feet in the neighborhood versus those that are 15 to 25 feet versus those that would be 26 to 48 feet tall. This is the project that Nate had mentioned, the Fairway Glen, and you can see in our project proposal either this or the 2 Ls. Both are roughly the same size in massing, and let's say this property overall of Fairway Glen is less than half the size of the total property here. So ample green space is allotted in this project relative to even a Fairway Glen. Previously, I didn't mention that the last project also had, or the option B had 91 units and I think 184 in parking. So again, meeting that requirement of parking units to residential units, both, as Nate mentioned, within that 40 to 41 unit per acre range. So essentially where these massings came from was taking a maximum, let's say, buildable area per the parking requirements, so how many square feet we could fit with X amount of units and then X amount of parking. But then really, again, wanting to avoid this kind of situation at all costs of a massive block. And so it started by breaking it in the center, and then further adding either vernacular elements that would match the kind of architectural style of the neighborhood, or stepping the larger massing for terraces for residents of the apartments to inhabit and populate with plants, etc. And then further carving even the corners of the building to, again, reduce the massing along Monona and Dean, and really create, let's say, a kind of neighborhood feel to the entire project. And again, as mentioned, there's a restriction of access to this one point to address those concerns of heavy traffic along Gordon or heavy traffic along Springhaven that might disrupt the children playing or current traffic patterns, and really just relying on the street lights in the city's infrastructure, which again is to be further studied, as Nate mentioned, and again allowing that green space to really take over the site. And in total, it's around 33% of the site now just on the ground floor in green area, and even more if we're counting the green roof, which we'll see in a second. So in creating, let's say, the facades of the project, which we consider to be still in flux, still in study, and entirely separate from the rest of the project. Well, let's say the massings of the project, like the two are somewhat independent and can live separate from one another. The massing being one decision to be made, the the facade being a separate. We looked at both the kind of civic architecture of the neighborhood and saw a lot of neoclassical tropes of gridding and cornices and window mullions in certain gridded patterns, etc., or horizontal bandings, impediments, colonnades, etc., that all kind of speak to a neoclassical language, and at the same time a very vernacular gabled roof kind of architecture, which is much more about shingles and lap siding and sometimes brick siding or sometimes this Fachwerk, like German style siding, etc., or even in some cases stone. So really taking these two styles into consideration when considering the two contexts of the site, either the more commercial or the more residential. So you see here in this initial massing, it's again a proposal of bricks with horizontal striations of different amounts of mortar, which
Doug, you're on mute.
Sorry, I don't know how I hit mute. My mistake. With the stepping along Monona that really again works to break up this massing, and you can see here the kind of park in between. Again, an entirely almost different proposal, but it's very similar massing, adding now these protruded balconies, but really with a striation horizontally again, but in metal paneling. And so we could imagine the breakdown of while it's not broken down in this, we can imagine the breakdown either being almost like a horizontal lap siding or maybe a vertical, more feeling like corrugated or standing seam kind of feel, but feeling a bit more vernacular and all, a bit more tectonic. And then we could imagine maybe something that's in between the two with a strong brick base and then a metal panel top to the project, emphasizing, let's say, this commercial with one material and then the residential with another. And then in the back, the townhouses for us, we want to explore the design of these in terms of vernacular elements that we read throughout the residences and the neighborhood, and really incorporate elements like porches and balconies and dormers and gables that all feel very much part of the rest of the built fabric of the residential neighborhood. And then again, just exploring these in different material options. So in this instance, we see 3 different tones of metal panel, again creating this kind of striation horizontally, possibly a version where the brick striations now go vertically instead of horizontally to give a sense of these individual units for the townhouses. And again, you can see the walk-up nature of them here, but really alludes to the kind of subdivision of each of the properties. Or again, in brick that is similar to the aforementioned different striations using different amounts of mortar between the bricks. So all within these kinds of vernacular language of the neighborhood, with different material studies and different facade studies. That is all to be, let's say, still calibrated and worked out. But so one thing is the massing, and the other is the material studies and use for the facade. So again, here is, let's say, like a kind of range of the palette, which is subject to change, just per what we feel is the right for each of the mass. But you can get a sense here of that kind of range of materiality. And again, as previously mentioned, the green space for the project is around 33%, something of that nature on the ground floor or at grade, with the public plaza and this neighborhood park, as well as a stormwater management retention garden. So we really want to exceed the rate and requirements for 10-year storms, and we want to do that with rainfall storage on site by 2.5 times the what is required, from 1/2 inch to over an inch. And we also, of course, want to keep the plantings along the periphery and part of this as well within the site to be quite low maintenance and not energy intensive, not requiring a lot of extra watering. So really using a more wild palette that fits the Wisconsin vegetation and something that will change colors throughout the seasons and give a great texture to the overall feel of the landscape, and as well, again, this stormwater retention garden, to be determined exactly where it goes on site, but an element that will filter water and put it back into the groundwater resource, and of course, as mentioned, a kind of year-round beauty. So considering the plantings from a perspective of seasonal change. And here's just a compilation then of different facade treatments and massing options. So with that, I'll return it to Nate, and we look forward to hearing your opinions.
Thank you, Doug, for presenting, and I think we just want to open it up for Q&A and really just get feedback on the two different options for the massing. And then kind of once we settle on option A or option B, get a good sense of where the Planning Commission stands in regards to our facade and whether they like more the brick facade or the metal panel. So with that, I'll turn it back to Nancy and let her guide from there.
Thank you, Nate. Appreciate it, and thank you, Doug. Nate, before I open it up for commission comments, I'm wondering if, I know that you did have a neighborhood meeting between the last time you were here and now, and my understanding, well, certainly I can tell that you did take the commission's comments seriously. So. I very much appreciate that. This is quite a difference, and but I wonder, from your perspective, from both your perspective, if you could share how you think the neighborhood meeting went, and the feedback that you got from the neighborhood. And I think, actually, also Devin, I think you were, since NESBA hosted it. I know Christy was there too. If you wanted to let us know too, I think it might be helpful for us to hear how that meeting went before I open it up to the commission.
Sure, I can kind of briefly comment on that. We were happy to host that for the developers and opened that up to the neighborhood. We broadcasted that across social media channels. Excuse me. Facebook, Nextdoor, tried to promote that as best we could. And we got a decent-sized crowd for that. And I thought that the feedback was very good. There were a lot of questions asked. A lot of it had to do with things that couldn't necessarily be answered regarding what specific businesses would be planned to move into the retail spaces, and sometimes about what type of businesses. There were some questions about parking issues and traffic flow. There were some questions about regarding the current amount of traffic flow that goes on Dean in the morning. And that was where Nathan talked about doing a traffic study at some point. But overall, I thought that the feedback from the community members and the neighbors that attended was very, very good. People seemed very appreciative of the changes that were made to the design and the sort of consideration that was taken.
Great. Nathan, Doug, do you want to add to that?
Just to add a little bit to that, I think the major concern from that meeting that I took was in regards to the traffic on exiting onto Dean and then onto Monona Drive. And I think it was primarily around just the increase in traffic, because obviously we'll have about 80 to 90 tenants living there, maybe even more that are using a car. And so just increasing that traffic pattern and looking at, how does that work and how far does it back up from the light? from Dean back. And I think that was kind of the major concern we heard. So we probably need to take that and have a little bit more discussions internally, and then more discussions with staff on how we manage that process.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I would just say from my perspective, before I turn it over to the commission, it's hard for me to imagine actually that size of a building with only one curb cut. I mean, I totally appreciate that that we don't want to have cars exiting onto Gordon, but I would be curious to know actually, even in terms of our fire and police department, if a building that size could only, especially when it's also a bank exit and a major intersection. So I know that would be a concern that I would still have, that having only one way in and out of the building. I think that's probably, but I raise that because I would love to hear what other commission members think about that as well. So if it's okay with you guys, I will open up. Yeah,
Sorry,
Brian.
Madam Chair, before we move to Plan Commission comments, as it's listed on the agenda, we should open the public hearing to see if there's any additional comment before moving over to the Commission.
Yep. Is there anyone else here that would like to speak during the public hearing portion of this particular proposal this evening?
Yep, I've got two gentlemen in the audience that are going to be going up to the microphone in a minute.
Great, thank you.
A couple things for the developers here.
Sorry, if you can give your name again.
I'm Chris Dahl, 4601 Monona Drive, current resident. So even with the entrance and exit of the parking lot moved, you folks are talking about having almost 100 units there, which, you know, if we're talking one person per unit, which we're probably not, is going to bring 100 people and probably close to 100 vehicles. How are you guys suited to park all those cars? I can't see underground parking being suitable for all of the vehicles and the traffic that you're going to be bringing. And we are under the understanding that there will be no parking back on Gordon, because during the day the high school students park that street completely up. You won't be able to add, there will be nobody parking on any streets. You can't park there on Dean, and you can't park on Springhaven. So your only choice is Gordon, and you can't park there because it's student parking. Not only is it student parking, it's opposite days. You can't park there it's 24 hours your vehicle has to be moved to the other side. It's coordinated by day of the week, I do believe, even or odd. And I believe that is more there because of the students thing than it is just like winter snow emergency plowing. So that's a huge problem. Also, as far as the displacement goes, I mean, you guys are talking, this all sounds real good, but there's big parts being left out, I feel like. So you have spaces for incubator businesses. What about the 4,000 square foot antique mall that sits there now? That's not an incubator business and would probably take up the whole bottom floor of one of your commercial buildings. And you were also talking about free space for incubator opportunities. Are you going to offer anything to the folks that already live there? Is there an extension out to them? Another thing I would say to the city is there hasn't been a real great job of notifying the people that are actually involved in this about this issue. There's two people that weren't here for the last meeting and aren't here for this meeting because they weren't even notified, and they live in the building. That to me is also a huge problem. This neighborhood get-together that you folks had talked about, unless it was it happened at the last meeting that we had here, there was no mention of that to me, and I live in the building. These are all huge red flags. I hope everybody's looking at this and paying attention, because it's not good. I appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time.
Thank you. Just again, just so everyone knows, we're just at the public hearing, pre-hearing stage. Okay, we're not making any decisions tonight. We're just taking this slow. We're taking it one step at a time. I think the first time they came through was multiple months ago. Just know that, again, this is a public hearing and a pre-hearing. Brian, did you say someone else is in City Hall that would like to speak?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Hello, Jeffrey Halloran. I own and operate Flying Low Skate Shop, and we are located within the Monona Antique Mall, 4601 Monona Drive, Suite 102. Just really quick to follow up, I wasn't 100% clear on whether or not Nate and Douglas were present at the meeting when my initial statement of the Monona Antique Mall and Flying Low Skate Shop LLC small business displacement compensation request proposal was delivered. Nate and Douglas, were you zoomed in with us then, or was that prior?
Yeah, we were here.
Okay, cool beans.
We can follow up with you as well outside of this commission hearing.
So that all communicated and got through clearly. Just wanted to specify that. I think that everybody involved with this planning and decisioning is wanting everybody's needs and concerns to be addressed in some way. And when Chris was speaking to the fact that the neighborhood get-together, kind of a touch base feedback meeting was held, I myself was not aware of that in any capacity either. And to the best of my knowledge, nor were any of our other 4601ers at the Monona Antique Mall property. So in further moving with the planning for these proceedings, whatever our decisions are made, I think it would be fantastic if we knew exactly where we can be touching base on a day-to-day basis, so that none of us who have a stake to hold in these decision makings are going to be left out in the cold. And that is the main addressment that we made in our small business displacement compensation request proposal. Again, I can only speak for Linda at the Monona Antique Mall and myself with this, and we did make mention to making sure that we touch base on covering all of our bases, and especially taking care of the civilian residents that are going to be displaced should this planning go through. And the reason why we went with this small business displacement compensation request proposal was because, as I mentioned before, sometimes we can kind of read the writing on the wall, and if we're talking about what kind of metals we want to use and massing and these types of things, a lot of work has been going into this project. And it's kind of just now going from the last point where us 4601ers are, I feel like, kind of somewhat being left, feeling that we're being left out in the cold in the Planning Commission, because anybody that was in on this positive feedback from the neighborhood, I am not seeing present at this meeting here. And when Chris was talking, I kind of noticed you there, if I may, Gene, is that right, Edmonds? Kind of saying something, and you're the OG neighborhood person, and I'm looking to the OGs, if I may reference, with respect, like the people that have been in Monona and that are going to really be seeing this change happen firsthand. Construction takes a lot of work, and there's going to be construction crew people, and I'm sure we're all hiring the most respectful crews that we can get on board. I just want to touch on these points so that as this planning goes through, nobody's left out in the cold on this thing, because I'm sure the construction groups have something great to gain from this, both on the monetary end. I just want to be respectful here, but also realistic. And for the community is how we're pitching this, that it's going to be a neighborhood thing Well, when I look at those plans and I look at those, I forgot what they call the green areas, those aren't going to be for just any old Joe Schmo to come in off the street and waltz up there and enjoy the green space. This is going to be whoever, can come in with the money to live in a state-of-the-art kind of a luxury apartment type of a living scenario. And I'm not trying to, discredit any of the hard work that is going into this project in any way. Again, we just want to, triply make sure that we're not leaving any of the people that are going to be displaced out, in the cold, and that the folks that are really going to be feeling it equally, and I'm looking at the residents who are worried about the traffic and things of this nature, that their concerns are going to be addressed too, whether it's in finding an option C. I know, like I said, a ton of work goes into your planning, and I respect that, but something that is going to, if this plan moves forward, that sits the best with everybody, and that isn't going to totally, fudge anybody over where they're really kind of just feeling like we did not have our voices heard on this, and there was kind of some behind-the-scenes special invite type, neighborhood meetings where, we had the right people to weigh in with the right kind of input, and then we, the other people that kind of just found out by luck that this hearing was going on today showed up to kind of, have our voice be heard again. So,
okay, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Again, I appreciate you speaking. I appreciate you speaking earlier this evening. Just to be clear, I think what was said, and Devin's got his hand up, so I certainly respond. I believe what I said was I understood there was a neighborhood meeting and that the reaction to this proposal was more positive than the last one. That's not to say that the neighborhood loved it or that there weren't still issues, but just that they felt like it was moving in the right direction. But I appreciate you speaking again. And Devin, go ahead. You have your hand up.
Thank you. Just to kind of clarify and kind of address that one particular question. So my name is Devin Renner. I'm the director of the Monona Chamber of Commerce. I don't work for the city. I'm not officially affiliated with the city, even though we work with the city. So we made that information available that we were going to be hosting an informal town hall. There was no back alley dealings. This was nothing behind the scenes. Excuse me. We tried to make that as publicly as possible, but we don't have the resources to mail every resident, something saying, hey, this is happening. We posted something on Facebook. We boosted it. We posted that on Nextdoor. We reached out to the local newspaper. We put that in the Monona newsletter. So we did a number of different things to let as many people know as we could, but there was nothing secret about this. There was no special invitations about this. This was something that we put out, and we invited everyone to attend. My apologies if you didn't, you weren't aware of that, but there was no attempt to exclude you by any means. And the city officially had nothing to do with it anyway, as we are a separate nonprofit entirely.
Thank you, Jillian.
Hi, I was just going to say, with respect to the neighborhood meeting, I think for a street where there's some older folks who are not online, and then some people who are newer to the community, like myself, even if you don't have the resources to send everyone a letter in the neighborhood, I might have known about it if you had just printed out information and stuck it under the doors of the, 30 houses that are on the block. So maybe next time that could be a way to reach out to people who may not be checking the, Monona Business People's Association. I'm sorry, I botched the name, but that might be a way to actually reach people who you're not reaching, which is clearly a problem with the last meeting. I had a question for Nate and Doug. You talked about the new townhouses that are part of the design, and I just wanted you to clarify, actually I don't know if we can ask questions, but if those have entrances on Gordon, and the idea is that residents might enter and exit from that side, because that's kind of, I appreciate your efforts to change the design, but for those of us with concerns about parking and traffic, a change in the design that has part of the building facing Gordon kind of raises some concerns about the residents and the guests of those townhouses parking on the street that, as prior people have mentioned, is already pretty congested with parking from the high school.
I can address that. You want me to address that, or?
If you could hold off in addressing that until we get to the pre-hearing. I like to treat this the same as we would if we were in the appearance section, which is to say we're in a listening mode for those people that want to participate in the public hearing. So we will get to that. Jillian, Brian, do you have somebody else at City Hall?
Yeah, one more individual wanted to speak. So I'm going to just have you come up to the microphone.
I see you, Jean. Jean, we'll get to you.
Hi, I'm Linda Norseman. I own the Monona Antiques. I just want to show my appreciation for these two guys sticking up for me, because I am just too emotional right now because of the possibility of losing my store. That I planned on being there at least another 10 years and hopefully having my granddaughter take it over at that point.
Okay, thank you. Jeannie?
Now that I've seen the plan too, I'm really concerned about this 100+ people who have cars coming out on one exit. I'm kind of like with you, Nancy, too, as far as the fire and the police. I mean, I wouldn't think they would just want one entrance into that property. And then secondly, if we're talking 100+ people coming out, I can't see that everyone's going to turn onto the intersection at Monona Drive and Dean Avenue. They'll come out of Dean and they'll go right around the corner and come down Gordon Avenue. I see this all the time anyway, because a lot of traffic, other than the high schoolers, come and use our street. I mean, it's like a main thoroughfare, and I never understood why they come by the church and then they go down toward Dean Avenue, and it's like a shortcut to some people. But we have a lot of that. So I'm really concerned, and I'm also concerned as far as Jillian with the townhouses and where are their guests going to come. I mean, if they park on Gordon Avenue, we're going to have another parking problem.
Yeah.
We already have one with the high schoolers. Yeah. So that's it.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up. That being the case, Brian, is there anybody else there at City Hall that needs to speak?
Yes, just one more gentleman has to finish his comment.
Okay.
If we could get on some kind of email list where myself and Linda with the Antiques Mall and anybody else at 4601 that is standing to be displaced in this thing, that way we're keeping touch base, and there's any kind of a, not a secret meeting, but happening here, and if you found out about it, you found out about it. We want to be in and on the loop every step of the way for the rest of this thing, so that we can weigh in on this thing and also try to be a voice for the surrounding neighborhoods where, if your folks built these two houses and now you live here, it's not the same as like, I need to pick up and find a new skate shop or something. I think that a lot of the underlying issues that really are the core problem that is being addressed with the neighborhood is saying that this is going to be something that is going to, it might take another option C, it might take another option D. Whatever we're going to do on this thing as a community, we would like to be in on every step of the way further, so we don't find out at the next meeting that there was a different meeting that we missed our chance to weigh in. And then we can ring the town bell and we'll have the whole neighborhood come out, and then that way they can weigh in on the next neighborhood meeting. And if it means that we all got to kind of just get our say in. Everybody that's got standing to lose something or to see something happen to Monona that we don't want to, we know that you want to make a good project with this planning, and we respect the hard work that's going into that. Just please, we will give our email at the end of this thing, and for us to please be included in these steps of community building, and that's what this is. And that was what I wanted to kind of just tie my proactive and positive message that I tried to bring to this presidings in a way such that we're all looking to make the best out of this thing, and we don't want anybody over on our end on 4601 at the Antique Mall and Flying Low Skate Shop and the attached residential rental areas, or equally, important, the surrounding residential house owning neighborhood with a lot of what is family. Nobody wants to see a car ripping out of that one entrance for 100+ buildings coming around after they've had a couple of beers on the Friday night watching the Packer game and smoking some kid that's, playing in the middle of the night at 7 or 8. So these are the real kind of like nuts and bolts things that I don't want to stand by and see happen in our community. And I trust that you all will take this mentioning to heart. And I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, Brian, are we good?
We're good.
Okay. With that, I'm going to close the public hearing. That would be number 5E, and move to number 5F, which is the key hearing conference on the request by Compass Properties of the Newton project for consideration of a zoning permit for construction of a new mixed-use building at approximately 4600 4611 Monona Drive between Springhaven and Dean Avenue, case number 2-016-2021. Brian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a ton to relay here because we've kind of already gone through the nuts and bolts of the presentation, but just some background for the Commission. Again, this property is currently zoned retail business. If this project were to move forward in future iterations, there would need to be a rezoning to Commercial Design District. Plan Commission has had two previous pre-hearings on this project. One was on June 28th, the second was on November 22nd. The project guidance for the comprehensive plan is commercial guidance, and the recommendation for this evening is there is no action necessary or required. Staff just requests the Plan Commission provide feedback to the applicant, including comments on zoning and land use, site design, site circulation, traffic loading, architecture and massing options, among any other topics that you may want to raise. Nate already kind of walked through the changes in the previous iteration, so I won't go through that. As we've mentioned with all the previous applications tonight, any public comment that we received prior to tonight's meeting was forwarded to the Plan Commission and will be incorporated into the record for this application. There is a request for a CDA review of tax increment financing that is ongoing. That is separate from this process. It's a separate CDA process, and the applicants would be working with the CDA to determine if that's a possibility if this project were to move forward. And with that, I'll pause and take any questions that you might have for staff, or if you have any questions for the applicant.
Got to unmute myself. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. Chris, would you like to start us off?
You're going to throw me into that right away. Okay.
Well, I can.
Absolutely. Here I go. So, I will start. Oh, where will I start? I guess I'd like to ask the applicant, and I asked you last time, but maybe you could clarify that you have control of this property. Not necessarily own it, but you have an option or whatever in place so that you have control of this property right now?
We are under negotiation still with a few owners in regards to the purchase agreements.
Okay. The reason I asked is they certainly have leases with all these people I've spoken tonight, and I don't know when their leases run out, but if you buy the properties, you're subject to the same leases, I would imagine, and you'd either have to buy them out or wait out the expiration of the lease. So what I'm getting at, that's really something between the property owner, and a lot of these notices are not getting, a lot of times the city sends a notice out to the property owner, so there could be some disconnect there with the property owner not passing the notices along to the tenants. I'm not sure. Big picture, for me, if I had to pick between A and B, I'd pick A. I had the concern before, which is density. I still have some concern about how big this thing is and how much we're putting on that property. Again, the devil will be in the details. I think you guys have made a lot of progress. You listened, and I appreciate all that. For building palette, when you looked at it, for me, brick, not metal panels. The architecture used to compare to was La Follette High School, and I think the other one might have been Winnequa Middle School, but those aren't great examples of classic architecture in either Madison or Monona. That's cheap school buildings when they were trying to just get by. I would say for the townhomes, though, which are really closer, well, right across the street from the residential, I would say it should be complementary to the larger buildings, but maybe skew more towards residential construction, which might be some brick with a combination of some, hardy plank or whatever you use these days, or something to make it look more residential. As far as your orientation, I would agree with the way you made your orientation. If it wasn't clear to the people that are watching, the parking's in the back of the townhomes, so the parking for the townhomes is in the back. Now, I agree there might be a guest that comes to visit the townhome that would be probably no different than a guest coming to visit your home, and certainly they might at some point in time park on the road, but I don't anticipate it wouldn't be the tenants of the townhomes. So since I mentioned the word parking, I'd like to talk about it a little bit. What is your underground parking management plan? Who parks there, who doesn't, how's it get controlled?
Doug, do you want to take that one? Or actually, I can probably take that one. It's probably easier for me to take it.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I couldn't get on mute.
It's essentially controlled by our property management firm, and they will be having a portion of the residential parking under there, but then also there will be a portion of designated commercial, with most of the commercial parking above grade.
Okay. If you look at the parking ratios, you haven't met them. You're very, very close, but there's only like 24 stalls up above, and there's I think the requirement for the commercial alone was 41 or 42, something like that. So we have a definite shortage, and the greatest disservice you can do to the commercial is not provide enough parking. If they don't have enough parking, they won't survive. And I'm looking at trying to figure out ways to get more parking up above. It might be a crazy idea, but you've doubled up your drive aisles between coming in off of Dean and then that whole drive aisle just for the stalls that face west. And on top of that, coming in off of Dean, you've made an impossible maneuver. I don't see any large vehicle, pickup truck or anything that could even make that turn. If you stay in your lane coming off of Dean and try to make a U-turn to get into those parking or ATM or the bank drive-ups, you can't make that with most cars. It's way too tight. That first lane, there's no way any car can make that, a go-kart. And I think a typical pickup needs close to 50 feet, I want to say. You don't want to be anywhere near that. So one question is, do you have to have a full wall on the end of that on the west side? My thought is if you could have just columns supporting your structure and combine that entry exit on West Dean, slide it over to where your driveway is along those stalls, then you could take that space and you could double up and you won't get another 12 stalls because you're going to have to curve it back in, and it might require moving those townhomes to the north. But you could get a lot of utility and a lot more parking up there. You have to come up, if this is the final plan, there has to be a better way to get some more parking up above, because certainly it'll help if BMO has spots downstairs and they can park there with their employees, but there has to be more parking for all the other businesses somehow. That's why I asked about your parking management. So you need some plan to be able to get some people down there, but I think if it is a restaurant or a cafe, most people aren't going to want to go down there. That you need some parking up above.
Do you want us to address that or no?
Sure, if you'd like. I mean, this can be an open discussion here right now.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, that of course is to be looked into how to even further maximize the parking up top. I mean, we do have 30, not 24 in scheme A is what we're preferencing in that upper, that above ground parking 8 and then 12 and then 2 handicap near the.
Well, that's not, let me interrupt you. That's not true because you're counting all your townhome stalls and that's not fair because people aren't going to count. If you take the townhome stalls out, that's 14.
No, it's 12 to the upper left on A, on scheme A, 12 to the upper left, and then 8 and 8 would be.
It's so small I can't read it. It's 5 and 5. So that.
Sorry, 5 and 5.
Yeah, and then another 2 tucked in the corner by the restaurant. That's 24 stalls.
Yes, sorry, that's correct. And with the turn radius, we do have enough turn radius, though. That's measured per standard turn radius of a car.
I'll disagree, and you can prove that to me later. But you absolutely can't get into that outside drive up.
Regarding the parking, we'll definitely look into fitting more to the north or pushing the townhomes slightly to the north to fit more parking.
Okay, there's drawbacks to that. Of course, those parking stalls now, everybody coming and going is driving by them, which makes them tougher, but they're the furthest ones away too, and they're the last ones that will get used. The other thing it does is it shifts that driveway closer to Gordon, but from what I can tell, again, I don't really have scaled plans to work off of on this, but from what I can tell, you'll still be further away from Gordon than what the bank's driveway is right now, the existing driveway. Maybe you could confirm that. We don't have any overlay here to tell, but from what I can scale, I think the bank's existing drive-through entrance and exit is closer to Gordon than what I just mentioned would be. And the other thing we can do is the 14 feet. Correct. The 14 feet was for any of the structures. If you had to slide that parking a little bit closer, 10 feet is generally a good enough area to get some screening and landscaping in there. So you have some flexibility there. The only other place you have to take is that public green space, which there has to be some way to get more than 24 stalls for the businesses up on top. I saw a couple different versions, but for me, the cut corners are really important. I think that makes a big difference to the massing. I saw some of your sketches that didn't show when I say the cut corners, those 4 cut corners where you're talking about the step back, but then where it's not step back, those 4 cut corners make a big difference to how it looks and appears from Monona Drive and Undine. Question on your sidewalk. I think it's a waste to be ringing your big buildings with that sidewalk. Why in the world would we not access off the city sidewalk, the public sidewalk that's there or that you're going to build, and then just have sidewalks going to front doors and a couple patios? Number one, it would give you area for foundation plantings. It would minimize the impervious you have. It seems totally redundant. It doesn't seem sensible to have that sidewalk, I would say, on the 2 big buildings where you're ringing it part of Dean all the way along Monona Drive where there's already a sidewalk, and then 2/3 of the way on Springhaven where you're building a sidewalk.
No, the one along Monona and along Dean would just remain as is. It's more just adding to Gordon and Springhaven to continue that pedestrian experience from the actual neighborhood, I think is the intent. I mean, that is the intention.
That's not what your site plan. If you look at your site plan, I don't know. I'm looking at the one that has version A and the site plan. And that has a sidewalk going tight to the building foundation along Springhaven, all along Monona Drive, and then along half of West Dean.
Well, the white actually on the perimeter is the sidewalk, not the perimeter of the building. Not tight to the building, but the white strip on the exterior, on the perimeter of the site, if you're seeing that.
I see that, but I see another white strip tight to the building.
Yeah, that's indeterminate right now. Could be impervious paving or some type of of course, something to mitigate, let's say, the runoff and and not allow so much water to.
My comment is, why would you put any walkable surface there? Why wouldn't you use the sidewalks that you've got ringing the site and just put access points to where you need doors, or if you need a patio or something somewhere? It's a waste of green space, but it also really limits now what you can do for landscaping along there. Now you've cut it from whatever it is, 14. It looks like what you've drawn could be 6.
I mean, I think the idea is to put planters and just to enhance the pedestrian experience for people that are going to the commercial experience of the property and actually going to the public green plaza, to make a kind of continuous walking path if you want to go from the business incubator to the restaurant, or set some cafe tables out there, etc. And of course have planters. So I mean, yes, your points are well taken in terms of the overall, let's say, wastefulness of it if it were just concrete, but I think it's going to be more thought out than just simply placing a concrete slab.
I think that's my comment. So we get some better landscape areas, and where a patio or something decorative is appropriate there. And I take that comment right to your public green space. You show the same sidewalk or whatever along both edges of the building with a public green space in the middle. It might make more sense to just have one sidewalk kind of meander its way through there, depending on what your final design is. Again, that's just a comment.
The idea of that, again, was for either parking on either side to be able to access the front of the building for the commercial aspect.
So those 2 stalls you have next to the restaurant need a sidewalk to get to the front?
No, more the 12 in the back, to walk from the back to the front.
That's one sidewalk. The other sidewalk, I'm not sure. Okay. I agree with the chair that it seems like we should have another way to get out of this site, and I think Springhaven is the natural place to take something out. I don't know how you minimize traffic there, but one way in and out for this much density, I think, is a lot when we have a public road right there. I believe I agree with the neighborhood that a traffic study would be appropriate for this, given the concerns we've heard, everything we've seen. I think that would be a really good idea to have a traffic study. I'm sure I missed something here. My comment was to look at your turning radiuses again, where you're going into the underground parking. It looks like you're going in and you've got a right-hand turn just with not even a radius there. I'm not sure what you're anticipating, but we just would have to make sure that you have reasonable access there without going in another lane. And I'll just close it by again saying I'm very anxious to hear what the rest of the commission has to say. It's a lot. It's a lot of stuff right here. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Rob?
Okay. You're right. Yes, it is a lot. So, starting with the traffic, I think there are concerns about Dean, and it sounds like you're dealing with Strand to maybe get a traffic study, and I'd be curious to know how that pans out and what that tells us. I know there's already concern with stacking right now. I don't know what kind of wait times we're talking about. Are we talking about one light cycle, which is a couple of minutes, or is it several? I'd be curious to find out what that has to tell us. I had a comment wondering about emergency services, what they would have to say about this. Again, we don't have that information right now. Going back kind of big picture, I would start by saying that, kept referring to the last time you were here, and the commission all realized you were here one time, the time before, but you were here twice before, and this has gone leaps and bounds from the first iteration we've had. So, I mean, it's really a completely different plan, and I think it addresses a lot of the concerns and comments thoughtfully about what we had. The setback, the massing, the green space. You addressed the neighborhood justifiably didn't want a big apartment building right backed up next to residential. You have townhomes that much more meet the scale and appropriateness of that street. So I appreciate that, and it's concept A for me. I like the way that things are balanced in that. They do a lot of the same things, but it just doesn't look right to me, if that makes sense. You know, the balance between the green space and the massing and the exercise that you did to kind of show how you got there is appreciated, because it helped kind of explain the process and why you did what, and I appreciate that. And I like concept A. So kind of moving forward with that, you know, we see different development projects and they're constantly coming in underneath the required parking. They're constantly, you know, it's common that we come in with lack of green space. And I realize there's a couple of things with a couple of parking stalls, but it's pretty darn close to meeting the requirements. I don't disagree with Chris's comments about having above ground stalls to service the businesses, but it's not unheard of that we have underground parking that service those. We're doing it over at the Triangle development. Bear with me here. The sidewalks, I think that's a good addition to kind of complete the circuit. I totally understand what you're trying to get at. I think Chris's point is valid though, and not overdoing the amount of pavement space on the Monona Drive. I like it if it was in a silo, but it doesn't necessarily translate to the rest of the corridor. If you go down to Frostwoods and Monona Drive, where the Ryan Holmes is and things, there was like some attempts to do that sort of thing where they had patio spaces for seating along Monona Drive. It was a waste. It wasn't used. This isn't exactly the same, but I think the landscape could be more beneficial in this scenario, especially with that large green space. And I know you haven't designed all the supporting spaces for those businesses, but I'm sure you'll look at that. There's talk about shared mobility options. Is that still part of the plan?
Yeah, that is still part of the plan.
Okay.
And I kind of skipped over the whole sustainability initiatives, but all those still are in effect in this new plan. Those haven't changed.
Which are great. I don't think that should be overlooked at all. The green roof that we have here is, I don't think we have anything like that in Monona. So that's pretty cool and something to hang our head on. Moving on to kind of the design of the options, I would agree with Chris about, I like the brick option. You gave a lot of information, which is great. I just got to navigate through it all. Yeah, I like the brick option with the dark to light from the ground floor up. As far as the townhomes go, I'm a fan of the brick option kind of as is, as you've shown, similar to what you've shown, with the dark at the bottom going up. I understand Chris's comments, but I think brick is everlasting, and you could put lap siding on it, but personally I like it the way you show it. I think it's different. And jumping back, I think it would complement the neighborhood. We have brick buildings, full brick buildings in Monona. It's a bit of a hodgepodge here in Monona, if you haven't noticed. So that's my 2 cents on that. I like that. I really appreciate the step back of the buildings, especially on the corners. There's solar plan for this?
We're looking into it. It's kind of a fight between green roofs and solar. And on our Madison project, the green roofs won. We did solar thermal, but we didn't do photovoltaic. So we're looking into it, and it's kind of going to be It might be something that we do green roofs on one of the massings and then solar on the other. Is kind of the idea, but that's something that will be further developed as we get farther into design and into our energy models.
Okay. I had another question. Oh yeah, you can allow pets here, do you?
Yes.
Dogs, specifically, not cats.
Dogs if they're under like 25 pounds, or no, I'm just kidding. All dogs.
So there's going to be a dedicated green space for dogs only, I'm assuming. Is
Yeah.
that part of the plan?
We're not sure if we're going to do like a dog run. We're definitely going to have a dog wash in the basement, but we haven't decided yet if we're going to do like a dog run or dog area.
Okay. And I imagine a more detailed site plan is to come, kind of showing that. But just so the commission knows now that there's going to be some of that green space dedicated to dogs only. And then my final question, maybe my final, maybe not. Can you talk about what was labeled? Hold on. Neighborhood park. Is that? What's your anticipation for that? Is that for the kids across the street to use? Is it for tenants of the buildings? Is there going to be amenities there? Still in the works?
Yeah, I mean, imagined as kind of all of the above, sort of like a play space for kids across the street, a place to gather if you're part of the neighborhood. Obviously, not a child. It's kind of it's of course still in the works in terms of the actual design of the landscaping features and what elements would be part of that. But just a kind of amenity give back to that portion of the neighborhood as it becomes, let's say, more residential.
And one of the ideas we've contemplated, which I think is still to be discussed with staff internally, is some sort of public access easement, and then having a portion of our TIF proceeds go towards further development of a park or playground or something like that.
Oh, that's big. Okay, I'm done for now. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. I'll jump in if I need more.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Patrick?
All right. So let's see. Following up Chris and Rob, a lot has been said. I want to go back to the parking a little bit, and I want to talk about the way that I know there's a proposed restaurant here, and I want to mention something that hasn't been discussed, and that curbside is a thing, and curbside isn't going to go anywhere for the foreseeable future. In fact, I keep seeing an increase in my own restaurants about people that want to do curbside. So that's something that should be considered in that parking lot, because you're going to have patrons of the restaurant that will want to do that, and they're going to take up further spaces. So, it's just something to be aware of when we're talking about restaurants and, precarious parking situation. So, something to think about. I really like the addition of the business incubator. I mentioned that a couple meetings back, and I'm really glad that that's part of it. I still am on the fence here, thinking that this building is really large for this particular location, but that's besides the point right now. I think it's a beautiful building. I think a lot of care and effort went into listening to people and coming up with something that really looks, kind of fantastic. And I think it would be great in any number of places. I'm still not sold that it's great for this location in Monona. But that said, I mentioned the curbside thing, and I think I think that's about it at this point. Thank you.
Patrick, do you have a preference, A or B?
Oh yeah, A for sure.
A?
Yep.
Thank you. Susan?
Yeah, I also have a strong preference for A. I just think it's nicer looking, and I like the townhouses facing the houses kind of in the middle. I mean, it's more broken up with a green space. I just think it is a more neighborhood-friendly look. And I like the townhouses there. I think it does bring the whole complex into the neighborhood in an appropriate way. I'm also a fan of brick. I do like brick. I really like what you've done with the design. I guess we've kind of already said that, but I really appreciate how much you took to heart all the comments from the last meetings, and I really do like the design. I think it's very attractive. For me, the size is an issue more because of these other issues. You know, when you talk about some playground space or I just don't know how much a dedicated dog area. I'm not sure. I think there's room for all of that really with the green space that's there. It's fairly limited. I don't know that I think a dog area is necessary either. I mean, people who live in high rises downtown don't have, people just get used to walk their dogs on the side. That might be nice if you can figure out where to put it, but for me, that's not a necessary thing. I guess the other concern I share is one we always talk about, which is not so much the parking spaces. I do think you're close enough with the numbers, although you might, again, look at the restaurant, and the point Patrick just brought up is another interesting one. It's more a matter of just having the one entrance. I guess I share that concern that a couple of people have already raised. And I think a traffic study wouldn't be a bad idea, and running it by emergency services to see if they have suggestions. Because it might be that there does need to be another entrance exit onto Springhaven or someplace. We want to avoid Gordon. I think the other thing is, though, people coming out of here, if it turns out that turning left means they're going to be sitting in a light for a long time, they'll go right. But a lot of the people who live here may be going on the Beltline from there, and they may take a right on Dean Avenue and cut through some other street. I don't think we should assume everybody's going down Gordon Avenue, because I just don't think that's likely. I had a hard time figuring out how the bank in and out was going to work, and I guess I'd leave that to the traffic engineers to see if that really is a decent turn ratio and whether you can get in and out through the drive-through. So it's more the how people come in and out of it, whether that's really workable, that I'd be concerned with. So I guess that's another thing I think would be worth a look. Otherwise, I think it's mostly that. I just think otherwise, I really appreciate everything you've done with the design. I really think overall it looks great. It's just a matter of whether you can make it all work. So that's it.
All right. Thank you, Susan. Christy?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I really appreciate you guys listened to a lot of what we said and really put that into your plans. And it is a beautiful project. There's no doubt about it. I appreciate the massing A is my favorite. And then on the last slide of our packet, it's page 113, where you have the 3 different color concepts. The one farthest to the right, I would say option C is my preferred. I would say, it didn't, and I'm guessing you have thought about this as far as bike parking and storage. We're just 2 blocks off the Lake Loop. It's on Cold Spring here. So a lot of people have a lot of bikes. And so hopefully you have a good bike storage system in the underground parking. I think you absolutely have to have 2 exits. And what if a water main breaks and that exit is closed? You have a lot of people there, and once again, there's no parking on the street. So, that you absolutely have to figure that out. I think, that the only way I can see, because what the neighbors have said about the parking, this is all real. Our street is fully parked every day of the school year, unless there's a holiday. And it's a bit of a drag race at 3:30 in the afternoon and in the morning, and with buses, it is a very congested street. As residents, I should have said full disclosure, I live kitty corner to your project, so I see the traffic issues all the time, and as residents, there's no room for us to park on the street. So if we can't park in our driveways, we're kind of, parking blocks away. I think the only ways I can see this actually working with this volume of traffic and all of the traffic flow issues that exist now, given Spring Haven, which is a really complicated street and presents a really strange turning situation on Monona Drive, and then also at Dean with bank traffic trying to come out and queue up at Monona Drive, and there only being distance for about 3 cars to queue up there. I think 2 things would need to happen. Well, 3 things. I think you would need to get Spring Haven converted to a cul-de-sac, and maybe it could be part of your public plaza, a little green space there, because there's gonna be so much congestion. Having all of that congestion on top of the already strange turning situations and conflicts that happens there, it's only going to exacerbate that issue. So I would say that. I would say you talked about maybe investing in a park. What about investing in a parking lot for the school district? Right across from the school, high school, there are 2 properties. One is tennis courts that are no longer used, they're in pretty poor condition, and a vacant lot on the corner of Cold Spring, which the school district, I believe, has control of. You could put a parking lot right there and solve all of these parking issues, and the residents would be very happy. And then you could convert the street to 2-hour parking. So there is parking for your customers and potentially. So, other than that, I'm glad to hear you're open to the traffic study. It's something I've asked for from the beginning because the traffic situation here is very intense. So I just can't imagine 100+ more cars coming through this, complicated situation as it is. So those are my thoughts. I know that's really challenging, but I think it's beautiful. The traffic and the 100 additional cars in a very heavily parked area and congested area is kind of a non-starter for me. So.
Since Susan Fox also is on the school board, I would be delighted to have Susan. I know she wants to respond to the suggestion of
I definitely do.
At the high school.
Well, first of all, I guess another comment I meant to make and didn't. If speeding on Gordon is a problem, that's a law enforcement problem, and that needs to be called to the attention of the police department. They maybe need to enforce that more regularly at coming and goings of school hour. As far as our tennis courts, those are used for our FIAD department every day, except for now. But I mean, in the spring and fall, they are used for FIAD classes. We resurface them almost every year. We have a plan. The reason that Yellow House was taken down, we do own that property, but the plan is at some point, if we ever have the money, to rebuild those tennis courts, and it would take up that lot. So no, we are not interested in selling it. It is not for sale. Not going to happen. And there's been a long-term plan for that. And the tennis courts, the other issue with them is they face east and west. Why anybody ever built tennis courts that way, I don't know. But the plan would be to make them face north-south, as they should, and push it down more toward the drive so that, again, we could have some bleacher space, some places for parents to watch the tennis teams as well there. So they are used. They are used by JV teams as well. We don't just use a Huska. So they're definitely in use. But I guess, the main comment I wanted to add was the part about the speeding. I mean, there's no reason for that to be continuing. I know it's hard. I mean, I'm not naive about it, but it's a law enforcement problem, and plain and simple.
Susan, I would just say, as somebody who also lives in this part of town, as you know, because you do too, the parking problems that Christy is referencing, obviously related to the school, are real.
They are, and the problem is, part of that is due to the growth of Cottage Grove. We have more students driving now than we had before. We can't control that. We don't have enough parking on our property. We did get, didn't used to be allowed to let students park on Cold Spring on the tennis court side, and we did get Madison to allow us to do that. We're always dealing with Madison Battery too. That's about all we can do. Otherwise, the students do have a right to park on those streets. They do have to follow the laws, however, and they have to follow the alternate street parking. you go to, no high school ever has enough parking, even Memorial with its giant lots. I went there to speak one day in the middle of the day and had to park almost a mile away on a residential street behind a whole bunch of other cars that were on that street. West High School, teachers can't park at the school. They have to park several blocks away. So parking for high schools is always an issue, and we are landlocked with our building. There's not a lot we can do about it. So I wouldn't expect any solutions to that from our end.
Right, sure. Chrissy?
Yeah, I hope you didn't misunderstand me. I didn't say that you should sell the lot to Nate, but more that he should work with the district to help you develop more parking if that was a possibility. But I've lived on this street for about 7 years. It'll be 7 years in April, and we play at the tennis courts a lot. I've rarely seen anyone using those, so I thought those were not in use. I have asked some school board members about the parking plan, and I think this is another example of we probably need the high school to develop a parking plan before anything could happen to this block over here. People want to see something happen here, but the school district parking is just a real issue on our street. And I would say that speeding.
Can we reel it back in away from the parking?
I just want to finish couple more comments. The speeding has gotten better. The district has, or the police department has focused on our street due to our requests. And so it's gotten better. It's just when you have a volume of 100 cars coming through at a certain condensed period of time, a half-hour window in morning and night, it's a congested and dangerous situation. So that is what I'm saying. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
I just want to say one more thing about the parking, and that is that we at one time owned 2 houses on Jerome Street on the other end of that as well. And we actually did approach the neighborhood, that's Madison, city of Madison. We did approach them about letting us turn part of that into a parking lot, and we would screen it. Absolutely, no way was that ever going to be approved. We wanted to take the houses down and put a parking lot there. That was just not ever going to be approved by the city of Madison. So in the end, we sold those 2 houses, so we no longer own those. So there simply is no land that we have for parking. We use practice fields, and we, behind where the stadium is right now, there's just, we did also though, on the south side of the building, so toward Klinke's, we did take away some green space there and add some parking spaces a number of years ago. But that's what I'm saying, you can keep adding, you are never going to have enough, never going to solve that problem. So I just, I don't mean to sound as defensive as I am, but I am feeling a little defensive. There's just a limit to what we can do about it, and I think that's the reality.
Right. Okay, thank you. Let's, in the interest of time this evening, I appreciate it was in the context of the development, but let's see if we can reel it back into the proposal at hand. Thank you, all the feedback to date. Corrine, or to now, Corrine, I think, go ahead.
All right. The traffic study I'm glad to hear about. Susan made a point about coming out. I don't think we can assume that everyone's going to just turn, want to get on Gordon and turn onto Monona Drive. It reminds me of the conversation we had about the Slindy project as well, where, the Owen light, we were talking a lot about the traffic coming out, and that's 194 units, I think. And how long that light is. And, there was a lot of discussion about, well, we can't assume that everyone's going to be going out on Owen. We can't force everyone to go out on Owen. There would be people going both directions. So I think the traffic study hopefully will help gather more information about that. I like A as well. I like the terraces a lot, but a question about the building, I didn't see any balconies. Is there no individual balconies on the units?
Probably what it's going to be are Juliet style balconies where the windows actually open up to a railing in the window, but hasn't been designed exactly yet. But instead of protruding balconies.
Okay, so they wouldn't have a place to put a chair to sit outside.
There would be a few on floors 4 and a couple on 2 and 3 on the step massing that would be able to walk out on the roof. But some of our smaller units, like the studios and 1 beds and possibly 1 or 2 of the 2 beds, would just have the Juliettes that Doug just referenced. But balconies are something that we're kind of trying to phase out of our developments.
Okay. I like the addition of the townhouses as well, because we've talked a lot about, there's a lot of need for housing, and a lot of what's been being built is apartments, and some people want something like a townhouse, not maybe an apartment, something where they don't have to go up 3 flights of stairs or 2 flights of stairs. So I like that. Also like the brick. The thing that I was curious about was not curious about, but I agree with Chris. There's not enough parking on the surface level, I don't think, especially if there is going to be a restaurant or something like that. It's just not, I guess it depends. It depends on what type of restaurant it is. And if it's something that maybe it would be more of what Patrick said, and it's more of a curbside to go type of a place, maybe you wouldn't need as much parking. But I guess just as Susan was talking, or maybe it was, as someone was talking, I was wondering if there would be a way to, maybe thinking about what Christy said and what Patrick said, you could cluster the food. If that is what happens in that commercial space, the restaurant or the cafe in one area, and then have some sort of way to provide parking or drive-up access to those areas, and they would be near each other. I'm not sure how that would work. And then as far as Chris's point about the patios and the extra pavement, if you're going to be phasing out the balconies and doing the Juliet windows, maybe something similar for some of those businesses where they could open up, like do the roll-up windows or whatever, and then that would give you the ability to get some of that outdoor without having to actually do impervious surfaces. And I also agree 1 entrance is not enough. So that's it.
Great. Anybody else from the commission have anything else they wanted to share this evening? Chris?
I always forget something I had on my list, and this is probably more for the people that are listening in than the commission. Most commissions aware, but as far as we talked a lot about green space and whether it's public, private. With almost 100 units or 92, whatever it is, they're going to be required to pay substantial LUA fees to the city's park department, and I'm sure they're aware of that. You're required to donate so many square feet of land per unit, and if you can't, and the city chooses to accept it, you can pay in lieu of fees, and that's in our statute, and I don't know what the current number is, Doug may. But I don't know how they would dedicate a park. If they went to dedicate that neighborhood park, number one, I think it's too small for the Parks Department. I don't think they'd accept it as a pretty small park, but then number two, they'd be cutting out the green space on their property, so they'd no longer have the minimum green space on their property. So I think what they're talking about, some kind of hybrid and allow access, is great, but they will, everybody's worried about the parks, so there'll be a substantial check bill if this goes ahead that they'll have to write to the city for park improvements on other parks nearby or a major community park. Doug, you might have the exact numbers. I don't think it matters for this meeting, but parks are taken care of through the approval process.
And
go ahead.
Is it okay if I say something? Chris, we were referencing more of just a public access easement and not a specific dedication or contribution. We do plan to just pay the fee and not have it be in lieu of a land contribution.
Yeah, I didn't mean to speak for you, but you have no way to contribute to land. You'd need to.
Yeah, no, it's just I think it's nomenclature.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I would just add to what others have said, Nate and Doug, which is to say, I really appreciate the movement that you've made since you started, and listening to this commission as well as to the community. I'm like Corrine, I'm a little bit concerned about the lack of balcony. I appreciate the Juliet approach, but I drove around town actually to see if there are any full market rate apartment buildings that didn't have some sort of a balcony or some place to put a chair, even as looking at the Quick Trip across the street might not be the best view. There is a golf course there, and so I mean, I get that it doesn't quite work with the architecture that you're going for, but that level of articulation was a little bit concerning for me. I already mentioned that I was really concerned about the only one exit and entrance. I definitely had the same questions about the green space and how that was going to be handled, whether it was going to be somehow mixed use for the neighborhood and for apartment building. I liked A better. I liked the brick better. I liked the townhomes and brick better. And I was going to suggest, if other people didn't suggest it, that a traffic impact analysis is definitely in order. So, so I think with that, we've got pretty consistent feedback. Do you guys feel like you've gotten consistent feedback? Or are there any other questions? Yeah, Rob. Rob?
Yeah, it's unmuted.
Yeah.
Said I'd be back. Two things. The landscape plan, you've mentioned kind of materials, and you talked about having a low maintenance approach to that. Do you have a strategy for a low maintenance? I have an idea what you might be thinking of, but I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on that, or if you have not gotten there, I'll suggest something.
No, I mean, we still need to work with landscape consultants to pick the precise vegetation, but we were thinking, more wild plantings that exist throughout Wisconsin that are, they're a bit self-sustaining, they don't require so much maintenance or intensive amounts of extra water to keep them alive. So the plantings of this nature that, let's say that are more native to the wild landscape of Wisconsin.
I'm all for that. I would love to see a project that has more of a mass planting approach versus a boop, 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 where you got to go through and weed in between each plant and use herbicides and different things like that, but a more kind of rewilding, yeah, let's call it that, but in a formalized approach, careful selection, but it's a mass planting, so call it a mini prairie if you want. But having the right mix so that you have forbs and grasses and winter interest and also habitat, pollinators, things like that. So just
totally to be for sure to be studied with the landscape consultants.
And Robert, in our next presentation, we might bring it's Katie Udell from Angus Young, who's our landscape consultant, and we might bring her to the meeting. So we can give a little bit more elaboration on that point.
Okay. Do you plan to DNA test dog waste to know if whose dog?
My wife and I were just talking about this tonight, and she was like, "You have to do this." So yes, we are.
It's fine. You don't have to answer that. It's more of a joke for the commission.
Okay. Anything else this evening? And again, Doug and Nate, do you feel like you got a good sense of the direction that you needed from this group?
Yeah, I think. Oh, I see Chris raising his hand. Sorry, Chris.
Answer. I mean, you were first.
Okay. I guess, just summarizing, it sounds like preference A is the commission's kind of preference. Brick was the resounding answer to the larger massing. And then I know, Nancy, you prefer brick on the townhomes, but we might study that a little bit further. It sounds like we definitely need to move forward with the traffic impacts study. So we'll do that, and we'll coordinate with city staff on that point. And then I think we took down a bunch of smaller points. Chris, your point was noted in regards to imperviables. I definitely think we need to look at that. Robert, same to you in regards to the landscape and the emergency services. I think, Susan, you had a good point as well in regards to just in regards to the traffic study. And then I think the last item that we'll have to look at is whether or not we can have an exit onto Springhaven, which I think is really the only other rational spot to put it, because I don't really think Gordon is prudent. So I think we'll look at that. But other than that, I think the feedback was great. I have a question I want to pose. If we proceed with preference A, which obviously is going to cost a substantial amount of money in design and furthering our SD set into DD, along with, acquiring all the sites and doing all that, how likely is the Plan Commission going to possibly approve a multifamily development on the site? Because I think one of the feedback, and this was kind of a big red flag we got last time, was mainly in regards to we just don't think multifamily is a fit. And if that's the case, we can design the Mona Lisa and it's not going to get approved. So I guess what is, and it might be a hard question to answer for Nancy, but what is the likeliness of approval based on taking all this feedback into consideration?
Well, first of all, let me just say, Nate, I was not the only one that liked the brick on the townhouse. Yeah, I think there were several of us that were going there. But beyond that, I don't know that I can definitively answer that, but what I would say is that because obviously we have some commission members that still have concerns about this type of structure on this particular site. That being said, I don't think that we would be spending the time and energy that we are on this project if wasn't some viability. I mean, Brian, is that a fair assessment, do you think, of where we're at?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and we tell all applicants that we are unable to provide percentages on whether or not a project is approved. Right. That's, it's not the Plan Commission's role, it's not staff's role. We can't do that. A project has to go through the review process, and we have to analyze the public comments we hear and the materials from the applicant. I think, hearing the comments from the Plan Commission, I'd say, you're on the right track in terms of a lot of the elements of the project. There are still a number of items of concern that have to get worked out before the Plan Commission would get to a level where they would be comfortable approving the project. And so it's working through those details to see if, this project fits on the site in a way that makes sense.
Right. Like I said, we wouldn't, you're headed in the right direction. No, we can't say yay or nay whether we're going to approve it or not because we haven't seen the real plan. But we've obviously invested a lot of time, as we know you have. So.
Well, I would think the traffic study and another, deeper look at the traffic flow would go a long way toward how we would feel about it. That to me, as I listen, seems to be still the biggest remaining concern is just how that's all really going to work.
Yeah.
Because otherwise there are a lot of positive comments about the look of it and, well, I can't speak for everybody else, but even the size, if it can be shown that the traffic flow can work there.
Absolutely agree, Susan. I think there are like 4 out of the 6 of us that live on this that probably use Dean every single day. So, or sit at that intersection just about every single day. So, we're very aware of what the traffic is like now, because so I completely concur that'll be an important piece. Anything else? Chris?
Yes, I would say, my comment, I'll do it then. There's a lot going on here, and I know the applicant said they would be in next to get approval, and it would seem to me that the project of this scope, the changes we talked about, the things that are coming on, I would think we'd want to have another pre-hearing to kind of flush all that out, including looking at the preliminary landscaping, et cetera, before we would schedule a final hearing. And just so you understand how it works in Monona, we still would have to have a zoning change here, so that could be going on while we still look at the plan. And then I would strongly suggest you flush things out with CDA if that's your intent, because you know, if you're looking for something there, that would be good to know before you spend too much more time with us. And then the comment I was going to make, which is unsolicited, is Dane County's working on new guidance for green roofs, and it's very preliminary, but we've done some studies, and just as a heads up, a lot of the green roofs we looked at were the University of Wisconsin's. Their maintenance people are determined they'll never have another tray system. It'll all be membrane systems. And the DOA has decided they won't allow any more tray systems on any of their buildings. So it's just a heads up. They are having a lot of burnout problems, maintenance problems, getting in and out. And everybody we've looked at so far strongly recommends a membrane system versus the trays. So just this guidance won't be in place by the time you build any of yours, but it's just a heads up for what we've learned so far. And it says something that the DOA won't allow it, period.
Thanks, Chris. That's a good heads up.
Okay.
Madam
Any
Chair,
other questions?
there's a member of the audience that has a question. Yes, please.
What is the question?
Hello, and thank you so much. I just wanted to bring up one item that was not addressed, and it's how can we take the community that's being displaced, be it the small business owners. You know, I've gone to bat for my neighbors, both the residents and, you know, the antique mall. What I'm hearing from the Flying Low Skate Shop standpoint is an opportunity to be part of a project that seems like it's moving along with some pretty decent speed. And when you talked about the incubator and you referenced having a skate shop in there, and even, you know, the skateboarding, you know, can be a little bit of a noisemaker at sometimes. I am hearing some talk about a park being, you know, tossed around. Like, I would just like to know, would there be any way that you could incorporate somebody like myself from, you know, born and raised in Monona, I graduated at Monona Grove, you know, I'm back from having lived in San Diego for 10 years, and now I'm doing this new business of mine. What I see as an opportunity to have, you know, be another kind of a badge of success to go along to if ushering this project into fruition is, you know, our end goal here as successfully as possible with as many people being impacted or, you know, affected, is setting up people that are going to be displaced with some kind of plan where if it was somebody that just had been at it for a long time business owner, and they were able to take, you know, some funding to go on and do their way, or to take some funding to kind of weather the storm of the transition, because I need to be in my skate shop selling skateboards or beanies and socks every day. I can't just stop and, you know, wait for there to be a new incubator space. And I noticed in option A, if I'm correct here, Nate, was there one incubator space there in option A, and there was multiple incubator spaces in option B?
No, there's one in both. It'd be like one incubator. They're just in different places in option B.
Okay.
But the big one in option A is kind of the one we're leaning towards.
Right on. And, you know,
Can I suggest that I mean, obviously Nate, as indicated, Nate and Doug were here at the beginning of the meeting when you spoke, and then also heard what you said at the public hearing, and now we're hearing again, and I'm sure that they would be happy to sit down with or connect with you and their skateboard shop or the other people that are concerned about the displacement. And that would probably be, in my view, would be a more appropriate forum to be able to discuss that further.
Duly noted. Is why I wanted to present this and speak my piece on this, was to make sure that this was seen as a benefit to the whole of the group that we're all working with here today in the commission, and I didn't notice it come up in any of our adjustments here on the committee, where what is to be done with folks at Monona Antique Mall, what is to be done with folks at Flying Low Skate Shop, and I just wanted to proactively offer up my assistance with, like, hey, this could potentially look really good on the agenda if it was, we've already kind of worked it out with, like, making sure we take care of XYZ with these characters that have something to do, lose or gain in this. And if you had somebody like me who you had, you could facilitate me keeping going in the interim during the building process, and then land me in there, or basically in your incubator project, that would have to be something that would be like comparable to what I'm able to exist and run on now. And then I would be willing to work within that community spectrum and kind of like try to integrate some youth creative type arts type projects, much in the way that they do over at Communication on Milwaukee Street. And making these types of things for kids, I think, would be an interesting way that you could kind of go beyond all the good stuff that you're already working to push for. And that's why I thought it would be pertinent for me to step up against the plate.
Well, again, I appreciate it, but I in the interest of not being here too much later, I think probably the best forum would be for you to connect, with Nate and with Doug or
okay.
Or Doug Plowman.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good. Does that sound
Jeffrey,
good?
if you share your info with Brian, Brian, if you are willing to share that with me, I will reach out to you sometime this week and we can set up a meeting, and maybe I'll bring my skateboard by. I haven't skated in a while, but
that sounds great. Thank you so much for hearing that last touch base, and it's been a pleasure to get to sit in on this interesting meeting. I appreciate y'all.
Okay. Thanks very much. All right. So we're good, guys. Any other questions before you take off tonight?
No. Thank you so much for your time.
No.
All right.
All
Thanks
clear.
very much. Thank you. And we'll no doubt hear from you again.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it. So with that, we'll close the pre-hearing conference and go to number 6, new business, of which there's none. So we'll go to reports to staff and commission members. Staff report regarding status development project proposals.
Thank you. Madam Chair, just very briefly, one item that is on our radar, but we don't have a defined time for when exactly it's going to be back on the Plan Commission's docket, is the Monona Garden Project. The materials may be ready for your next meeting in, what would that be now, February? We will keep you in the loop as to whether or not that'll be scheduled at your first meeting or your meeting on the third week of the month.
Okay. Any upcoming other Plan Commission items that we should know about?
Not that I'm aware of, Madam Chair.
No. Any updates, discussion on DEI efforts? Updates, discussion on sustainability efforts? Chris, that was great to know about the green roof, the pan system versus the other.
Yeah, that's just talking to people that have them.
Yeah.
They get a lot of burn in the edges. They have a hard time. Another thing they recommend, which I didn't tell them, but have some type of a little maintenance shed or a chute or some way to get rid of the stuff when you're working on it, because they're hauling it all up and down the stairs and the elevators.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that's a good thing. So obviously we're on for upcoming meetings. There's no such thing as a canceled meeting. Although I'm noticing that February 14th is the next meeting. Is there anybody that is going to be crushed because they have, plans for Valentine's Day?
I can't do it because I've got dinner service in the restaurants that night. It's a ticketed event, so I won't be able to make the meeting.
Thank you.
I think if Brian's on his game, we just won't have a meeting on the 14th. He won't accept those materials anymore.
I'll see what I can do.
All right.
And if we could do it under 3.5 hours would be great.
Yeah, right, exactly. Exactly. All right. That leads to Plan Commission requests for information. Does anybody have any information they'd like to request this evening? No? All right. Well, I have a request, besides asking for adjournment, or more a comment, which is, Brian, I very much appreciate you pinch hitting tonight.
Anytime.
So thank you.
Actually,
I should rephrase that, not anytime. Anytime is needed, not anytime.
All right. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move adjournment.
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you all very, very much again.
Good night.
I really appreciate your wisdom.